fix him means make him or her to change his behavior so it stops being a problem for me.
When a 17-year-old is given so much freedom, he's not going to know what to do with that freedom. You cannot give a mediocre class from Arkansas $360 million. He's not going to know how to manage that money.
The woman who chooses the typical, macho man who, let's say, that is great provider and all of that things, will still complain that this man is not available.
Where can men go to speak freely like that? I don't feel well. I have anxiety today. I'm sad. I've been feeling depressed. There's not enough places like that for men to go, whether it's your wife, whether it's your friends, because you have this image that you need to keep.
You see relationships of people like they are 50, 60-year-old changing absolutely, like it's a 180 degrees shift. They connect more, they talk more. The woman feels safer now with a man who is not emotionally absent.
I've had patients who said this to me. I'm weak. I don't have the strength to kill myself, so I'm just going to let my eating disorder kill me. And they have succeeded.
I have heard both things. Boys don't cry, and this thing of a woman shouldn't complain. That's also something. Now, why are we so obsessed with shutting down somebody's emotions?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today's episode was the longest episode we've had on the Alaverdyan podcast. 3 hours and 17 minutes. And the conversation could have gone on if I didn't stop it. I'm talking about a licensed marriage and family therapist, my first male therapist on the show, Tigran Vardanyan. Tigran is such an important asset to the community of all Armenian Americans or any culture in general that wants to learn. He's fascinating, incredibly well-seasoned, and such a knowledgeable individual. I loved our conversation today. We dived into men's mental health, a topic that I've been meaning to have with you guys for such a long time. And I genuinely wanted to do it with someone that works with men. So we talked about men depression, intimacy with men, men's mental health in general, anxieties and anger. We dived into a lot of political topics. We kind of drove away from men's mental health, dived into politics. We dived into school system, inclusivity, which is happening in the world today, transgenderism. We talked about philosophy. We talked about psychology. It was such an amazing conversation. And I know that from this conversation, you guys are going to pick up so much information. So definitely watch the podcast. Definitely reach out to Tigran if you need any therapy services, because he's amazing, has his own private practice in Pasadena. And what's fascinating about him is that he speaks multiple languages, including Spanish. And something really interesting about him is that he received his education in Argentina, which is incredibly extensive and very detailed. So he's been in school his whole life, and he's just such a fascinating individual to have a conversation with. Honestly, it was just flowing so freely, and I think you guys are really going to be surprised and really elevated with this podcast. So stay tuned. You're going to be hooked to the TV for sure, because Tigran has some amazing points. And there was a little bit of debate with him and I about Christianity, about church, about the transgenderism movement. We did debate each other respectfully, but it was actually a really fun debate, which I think you guys will look forward to. Thank you for joining me. Make sure to subscribe and follow, and I appreciate you guys. Hi, Tigran. It's so nice to have you on my show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor. I adore your work and your purpose, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Today, I was actually really looking forward to speaking to a licensed clinician, a therapist, about men's mental health. Mm-hmm. I've covered so many episodes about mothers and marriage, and I haven't really covered men yet and their well-being. In your practice, what is your perspective about the mental health challenges of men? Are there? Because they're very silent about it.
Yes, they are. Okay. Right, like any other person, any other gender.
I love how you have to say every other person.
Well, because it's been a topic that has been neglected, for the lack of a better word, right? And perhaps it is related to the history behind psychology. It started Freud with like his hysterics, right? All
Yes.
women, but he had some male clients too. I would say now I would see cross cultures, Armenian cultures, Latino cultures, right? There is still a taboo about it. Like being in therapy is a vulnerable process. It's a process where you talk about the most intimate things that perhaps you haven't talked to anybody else in your life, your partner, your wife, your whoever that is, you're right.
Yes.
So you're opening up and talking about feelings, doubts, hesitations that you have in your life, regrets, right? Questions. And I don't think that we culturally accept that men can have those questions. Men can think, worry, fear stuff, right? Because those are not traits that are associated to manhood. So I see that a lot. It's changing. I know a lot of good therapists who are promoting and advocating for men's mental health, which is amazing. But I do see that there is a lot of still challenges related to the context. I see a man and the family is like, you're not crazy. Why are you going to this therapist? It's just taking your money, right? And it's so hard to explain, like, I'm hurting. I need this place for me. And that's not always received
Yeah.
in the best way.
I can see that. I'll add to that also, for hundreds of years, men have been portrayed to be the primary breadwinner, the winners of the family, the rooster of the family. And I want to know what has changed, because there's a slight shift in men nowadays, and you're right, they are feeling a little bit more vulnerable. Why is it that the vulnerability is coming out now versus years and years before? I mean, I don't think that our grandfathers had it any easier than we do. I think that if anything, their lives were much harder, but they weren't breakable. What do you think is happening there?
And we are paying the price, right?
As the next generation?
As the next generation.
How do you think we're paying the price?
We all grew up with this, father figure, grandparent, strong, working 12-hour shifts, and not complaining, but perhaps drinking too much, perhaps being a little bit aggressive towards the wife, perhaps kids too, perhaps being, too much outside of home, not wanting to, perhaps not, we called it respect, but there was genuine fear of, oh, dad is home, he's tired, let's keep his down.
Yeah.
I don't think they weren't suffering. I think there wasn't space for them to express any of that. What has changed, I think we have seen that, first of all, I mean, great for the guy who can be the sole breadwinner of a house. Successful, right? Right. Most of the cases, that's impossible.
In here, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well,
like
almost around the
almost
world, I
around
would
the
say.
world.
True.
So that has changed, and also it has changed that there is a need for the partner too to connect emotionally.
You mean the man in the relationship? Both.
Right? Like I see this a lot. Men coming because the wife is complaining, right? I don't know what's going on. I'm fine. I'm doing the things that I have done all my life. Like I work so hard, I bring the money, and she keeps complaining. What's going on?
Oh, very objectified.
Right.
Very.
I say, well, okay, so what do you think is going on, right? Like what is the problem? If you are doing everything that you should be doing, why isn't this person, feeling connected to you? Or what do you think? Are you happy in your relationship? Are you happy? Are you satisfied with your life? Well, no, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I feel like I'm being judged constantly.
Nagged, right? As they say.
Yeah.
Husband, my wife nags me.
Right. And okay, so you have a need there that doesn't respond to your role of a provider. You need support. You need your wife to acknowledge your hard work. You need your wife to see that what you're doing is out of love, not out of something else, right? Like at the end of the day.
Obligation or something.
Right. And so this could be like one specific example. It's so unique case by case, right? But I think overall what's happening is that um, the culture has changed, everything has evolved. Women crave more intimacy from their men.
That's
Men are acknowledging that they crave that too,
Yes.
and now they can voice it. The problem also comes up when you see these kind of like very traditional gender roles in a relationship, and then they come to therapy, or he comes to therapy. Is that, well, now I'm changing, I'm more open, I'm connecting, and she cannot take it. So I don't understand. It's always a lose-lose situation.
She cannot take it because she doesn't feel as strong, like the man's strong anymore. Because sometimes women, I feel like, can
For
view
example,
vulnerability as weakness in men.
yeah, I mean, she grew up with a dad that was not like that, a grandparent, an uncle, a big, older brother,
Yeah.
and this man is saying something about his emotions, which is considered like a feminine thing, right? Or it's
Today's world, yeah.
right. Like, why is that? I mean, I don't want to get too much into that conversation, which is a big thing, the cultural aspect, the systemic aspect. But like the immediate experience is, I'm working so hard in therapy, healing my trauma to kind of please my wife and to connect her in the level that she wants me. And now she is complaining about that, right? And the reality is that most of the time, these relationships have been going for years and years and years. And it has been the wife nagging the husband for not being emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
And now he's changing, but the entire relationship has to shift to accept this new kind of man, right? But I think once they can process that, you see relationships of people like they are 50, 60-year-old changing absolutely, like it's a 180 degrees shift. They connect more, they talk more, they support each other more suddenly. And the woman feels safer now with a man who is not emotionally absent.
I was just going to ask you this question because we're two therapists having this conversation, which is quite interesting to me. When there is this shift in the man, let's just say it's a macho man in a relationship that decides to be emotionally connected, goes through therapy, learns emotional intelligence to a certain extent, and is now emotionally available. What are the qualities that he's going to provide in the relationship from this emotional intelligence versus the absence?
Well, what happens when a woman, because men and women, we are equally products of the same system, right? So if you're going to say that the man was a product of a machista society, right, like patriarchal society, then women are too, right? It's not about the sex or we are all in different ways shaped and, let's call it, oppressed or whatever, for by the same system. So if the woman wants to connect emotionally, usually, right, in these traditional families, we are talking like Armenian families, Middle Eastern families, right, Latino families sometimes, many times, they're not gonna, their go-to person is not their partner. Their go-to person is mom, sister, friends. Why? Because they talk to their husband and the husband is like, I don't have time for this, or right, like what do you want me to do with this? I don't know how to empathize with you.
Oh, that's a big word.
Yeah, because I can, well, maybe they can see the pain, but I would say like there are equal responsibilities there where the emotional unavailability of the man makes a woman choose other resources, and that splits the relationship.
Yes, I agree with you on that piece.
Right, and they become more distant, more strangers.
They do. Advice from other people can definitely, tarnish the relationship because not everyone's advice works for your relationship.
Not even advice, just listening to each other.
Absolutely.
Right? That's so a big important piece.
It is. So when men are more emotionally available, yes, I do see a big shift in the next the two generations, our generation and the next generation. Vulnerability is not as respected. Women want the more macho man, but now the macho men are complaining that no, like we want to be more vulnerable because our mental health matters too.
Okay. I think some women want the macho.
Not all, we're not generalizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some women want that, perhaps. Again, because they are also a byproduct of certain values, certain things, right? And to be clear, when I'm talking about these cultural things, or ideological, I think there's like a misunderstanding of we can totally understand that and free ourselves or whatever. This is what our unconscious is.
Mhm.
A woman, and I have met these kind of people in my life, a very dear friend of mine, she's a feminist activist. She's very, very smart, very bright person. And yet for some reason, she chooses very oppressive partners constantly.
Mm.
Cognitively, she knows it's a problem.
But unconsciously.
Unconsciously, she's
Yeah.
keep choosing for that, right? But going back to your question of what happens if the person the man is becoming more vulnerable, and the woman don't like that.
Because there's a different level of vulnerability, Tigran, you know?
Hmm.
I feel like it's different because it's so easy, not for every man. Again, we're not generalizing, right? But when people tend to be a little bit more vulnerable, they can fall into that victim chair really quickly from the vulnerability, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there has to be like a good balance because essentially too, like being conservative, but I'm also very mindful. Like I feel like, yeah, women's friendship is so important because it's very health based, right? Like we need women when they talk to each other face to face, eye to eye contact. Some men can communicate with each other just with a beer bottle and just looking elsewhere, right? Like women's friendships are more health. I feel like it's more for health purposes. Men can be just like conversational, but vulnerability, I feel like I don't know. This is just my personal perspective. I feel like vulnerability can sometimes tarnish a man's manhood in a way. If it's not into a more like victim state versus, because it can take away a lot of the true nature of a man. What?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're using strong words.
Yeah.
True nature of a man.
Yeah. Because the nature of a man, from my perspective, is to be that provider, right?
So what do you do with these men who are artists, photographers?
Those are providers.
What if they don't make money?
I mean, does a provider have to be like objectified, like financial only?
Well,
Can it be
if
provider
he doesn't
of
provide
safety?
money, what that safety?
Yeah.
So if you have like a short, small guy who is not strong, I have met plenty of partners where,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, you're in a good. You're getting to something really good, which is we have fixed ideas of what a man is.
You think so?
Of course, but you're telling me a man. I don't want to kind of like. I'm not gonna even name him.
Who?
No.
No,
I
no,
promise.
please.
No, but in social media, you have this kind of like very stereotypical man. What is an
Andrew
alpha
Tatum?
man? I'm not gonna name him.
I can tell you don't like him. That's why.
No, because it's harmful. See, I have nothing personal against him, Jordan Peterson, any of these people, right? And it's not like I am more leftist or it's not
Yeah, yeah.
about that. It's about discourses have impact. They shape our identity. So if you have a discourse where whatever doesn't fit the role of a powerful man, financially, physically, whatever that is, but emotionally is not something that we qualify as a powerful man, being emotionally there for a person for some reason.
You mean vulnerable?
Not vulnerable.
Emotionally there for a person.
Emotionally supporting a person, right? What we are doing is, well, what happens with all these men who don't fit that narrative? Then there is that sensation of emasculation, right? Now I am feeling weak because I don't fit the narrative of the provider man who makes money. And I mean, let's agree that we see that a lot, especially in our culture. a man who makes money is considered much more of a man than a man who is not financially so successful. Not for everybody, but there is a thing about money and power, right? Um, in the same way, I think that these discourses can leave out a lot of the men that don't fully fit this narrative. Um, these discourses can be replicated by their moms, their partners, their sisters, their friends. So what you see is people, men, constantly trying to fit an image.
What image do you think that is?
The image of the macho man, perhaps, the image of the financially successful man, the image of the strong man who can, if somebody messes with my girlfriend, I'm gonna.
Mm-hmm.
And
To me, that's childish.
yes, it
That's
is.
not. See, I think that also to add to what you're saying, I know that we're on something really important here. It's going to be a philosophical conversation.
Yeah.
Um, I have to agree with you in a sense that there's so much changing that the perception of men is classified very differently now. Like a certain height, a certain look, a certain car maybe. And the man being sensitive is not really accepted. So what I'm talking about is there are men out there that are not your 6-foot guy. They're maybe your 5'4", and they are mechanics. They come home with dirty, oily fingers, but they're real men. So it's not really image based. It's really what you carry with you, what you put out there.
But it will be matter of asking this
Yes.
men, right? How do you feel when everywhere you sit on a table, you are a very honest worker, honest guy, you're doing your best to provide for your family, you're doing your best to have a healthy life, and you're on a table and there is somebody who is fortunate enough to be financially much more successful than you, and you feel yourself like you are invisible, like you feel yourself smaller, you feel yourself like weak, less of a man, right? Not necessarily because the rich guy is humiliating you or anything like that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of jealousy here and there.
Perhaps.
Comparison.
For sure.
Why
But
not? That's healthy.
it is a thing, yeah. I mean, we all compare ourselves to others, but these are the moments where somebody's manhood can be at play.
Like in danger?
I would say it's very, we could use that word. I think it's very back to Freud's like phallocentric kind of idea, right? What determines what is a man? I mean, it will be more masculinity and femininity, but like without getting into that, there are certain things, certain categories that a man has to kind of show certain performance, certain thing for him to feel like, okay, I'm a good man. It's an interesting question because what we are talking about here is kind of like that conflict that has been there for years and years and years, right? The woman who chooses the typical like man, macho man who, let's say, that is great provider and all of that things, will still complain that this man is not available, right? But it's hard to say. It's so case by case. I'm talking about like I'm talking and I'm thinking about specific examples. On the other hand, you have women who have a man who is vulnerable, and not because you are vulnerable, you are not going to be successful financially, right?
Yeah.
But like you're vulnerable, you're a working class man, and you have women that truly appreciate and connect with this man, and not for a second they doubt that this is not a real man.
Yes.
Right. But we feel kind of threatened when cultural values change, because we are very attached to our ideas of what a man is, what a woman is, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Those things are so rigid in our mind that anything outside of that we want to attack and destroy and criticize.
Because I feel like it's worked. Like, look, earlier when we were talking about like our grandparents and our dads, and yeah, I have to agree with you that they worked a lot, and maybe they were absent fathers, and yeah, maybe they beat our moms and beat us too, which happened to a lot of families, Indo-European or not. Like, we got a beating. So, that's something that the next generation has to take away with, right? Like something to learn from that, and then just find that balance. You can be a very vulnerable man, but my question is, how far can that vulnerability
You
go?
feel like they are victimizing themselves now more like men?
Yes, 100%. Because, and I'm not just for the side of women, I'm on the side of men and women coming together and forming a healthy
100%.
family and being happy. But from people that I've seen, I'm 40 years old, from people that I've worked with, friendships that I've had, men tend to be incredibly weak nowadays. And that's classified as vulnerable. Vulnerability is something different.
I don't even use that word that much. I mean, I will use it
Weakness?
today. No, vulnerability.
Yeah, like
Because there is an idea that I use openness, right? Because
we
when
can
you
use that. Okay.
right, because when you use vulnerability, it means that it's attached to weakness. It's attached to something bad is going to happen to you.
Somebody can understand like that. I see what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
But I mean, you get the point. The idea of vulnerability implies that now you can get hurt more easily, and I don't know why would that happen.
Are you the vulnerable type of a man? Are you open in your relationship?
Yeah, I'm.
Are you
pretty open.
comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, I have my blind spots, right? But sure, I try to be.
Okay.
When you are in a relationship, and your partner is not open to talk, to discuss things, you see something, right? You see, okay, his eyes look different today. His tone of voice is a little bit different. He seems more silent. He seems, something is off. And he's not telling you what's going on. Why? Because he's a man, and he doesn't have to be vulnerable. You kind of are in this like void of thousands of millions of questions that can cross your mind.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking about somebody else. He's worried about money. He's worried about his health. He's about, or he's angry at me, or like he doesn't love me anymore, or he's not happy. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know. And I think that the idea of being open and talking about emotions shouldn't be equal to being weaker. Because one thing that we all can perhaps agree in the field of mental health is that we see a symptom, a sign of something is wrong, right? Nowadays, I know that psychology is very obsessed with symptoms and getting rid of symptoms, right? So they shut it down, medication, whatever it is,
100%, yeah.
But the symptom has been and always has been a sign that something else is going on, right? You have a fever, we have to figure out, is it COVID? Is it the flu? Is it just sun? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
If I get rid of your fever, how do I know that I have fixed the problem, right? Fixed the problem. So my point is, usually symptoms have been a product of repressed emotions, things that we haven't been able to talk about, things that we have talked but nobody heard, emotions that we experienced. And again, Armenian culture, the adults are talking, the little guy comes in and wants to says a joke or something, and they just shame him in front of everybody. Grown-ups are talking.
I hate it when people do.
It's horrible.
Yeah, those things I don't like. Or don't cry. Men don't cry.
Yeah.
Things like that is like.
I've heard both things.
Yeah.
Boys don't cry, and also in the Latino culture, like I generalize Latino culture. It's very different from country to country, but this thing of a woman shouldn't complain.
Mm-hmm.
That's also something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, why are we so obsessed with shutting down somebody's emotions?
Yeah, why are we so obsessed?
It's a good question, right? But you see it and again, I'm not generalizing, but there are some voices, especially in the conservative kind of like side, where you feel like, oh, we want freedom. At the same time, we want freedom for certain discourses. Certain discourses shouldn't have a place. And to a certain point, I agree with that. Like, we should have freedom of speech, but some speeches shouldn't have freedom if we want to keep the freedom of speech. So I can't have freedom of speech if I have a neo-Nazi speech, right?
Yeah.
Because that speech goes against, we cannot have freedom for everybody. That's just it. You have to decide as a society that there are certain things that are too threatening to what you are trying to build. A neo-Nazi discourse now, if you censor that, you would say, oh, you are censoring, but we should have freedom of speech. Should we? Isn't that very dangerous, right? So going back to my point, when we are in a relationship and we are trying to shut down the other person, usually it's because that represents certain threat to us. Now, is it about the other person? I don't know. But if I'm experiencing too many emotions to the other side and I haven't addressed all my emotional baggage myself, I'm going to be really struggling to contain the other person. So what I'm going to do is shut them down. Or if I have parents, right, that have perhaps they have abused their kids, and nowadays they realize that that was wrong. It was accepted back in the days, but it was wrong. And now what's happening is the kid is saying, what happened back then, it really messed me up. And I'm doing all this therapy because I'm still trying to heal that. Yeah. And the mom or the dad is like, oh, I don't want to hear that. Just don't talk to me about that, right? Like, why is that? Because it's creating so much emotions inside of them that they cannot handle it.
Well, emotions and also judgment. Like, what parent doesn't feel criticized? And I've seen this happen, but what parent wants to have their child say, when the Soviet times were happening and I would come home and I would get a 2 on my math test, you beat the living Lucas out of me, Yeah. That parent feels like they're a bad parent.
Yes.
It's very ego-driven, that they feel very ego. I think that it hits the ego in a different way.
For sure, yeah.
And many of the parents during those years, I wouldn't say they were narcissists, but they really did have a lot of narcissistic tendencies. For sure.
I think the
because all the trauma and
Yeah. We have a lot of trauma,
We do as a culture.
As a culture, but I think there is like the piece of motherhood was so important, and the idea of being a good mom, it's so important for some mothers. That criticism can hurt a lot.
Ooh, yeah.
But also, I think this is a thing that continues to happen. When the parent is searching for the answers of how to be a good parent in their ideology, in their faith, in their, they are doing it with the best of the intentions. They're trying to get the information and create, raise a good child. But usually what happens is that they are so preoccupied with those things that they disconnect from the needs of the child. So what I did as a parent was because everybody was saying that that's the right thing to do. Okay, and the kid saying, well, but I didn't. I needed something else from you, right? So this is something that continues to happen, and you see the consequences. I worked with like kids whose parents are so religious that the kid is saying, I'm suicidal. I don't want to live anymore. I'm going to kill myself. And the answer is, go and read the Bible for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing against the Bible. But
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Your kid is telling you something. I'm hearing, a little girl who is saying that same thing. I'm depressed. I want to kill myself. I don't want to wake up in the morning. And, okay, this mom asked, well, why is that? Because I feel like I don't belong. And the answer is, you don't need to belong. Nobody needs to belong. But the child is saying, I need to belong. I'm desiring this kind of like these connections and completely neglected. Why? Because in the mom's mind, her being a good student, being respectful, all of that mattered much more.
Yeah, their image.
And in that sense, I do agree. There is some kind of like narcissistic thing there
Yeah.
because they are more worried about if the neighbor
Yeah.
sees
Yeah.
what she's
Image.
gonna. Yeah,
It's all about the reputation. What would they say? If you go to therapy, I mean, I was finishing my practicum hours for a professor of mine, and I literally had a woman who was petrified to come just so that people wouldn't see her with her child and recognize her, and that they wouldn't talk about their family. Like, it was just so heartbreaking. They're not, it's like free it's not free. Like, you want to give your child optimal health, but you can't do that because constantly in your mind is your image and your reputation. What if somebody sees me? What are they going to think?
right. Yeah, and that creates a disconnection not only from your child but also from yourself.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like in parallel to our conversation about men.
Mm-hmm.
If the man is so worried about satisfying that image, how can he actually be connected to his own sense of manhood or, just person,
Yeah.
right? Self. Um, and I do think that there is the more rigid these ideas are, the more hurting, right? Like the more pain people go through, and there are many people who live with certain. I mean, you cannot universalize this for everyone, right? Because I think what's happening now with psychology, it's every truth has to be for everyone, and you see that with. I'm going to get a lot of pushback in this, but attachment theory. We have these trending theories, right? Attachment, and they claim universal truth. And the problem is that different cultures, different backgrounds, different life stories, and you miss the uniqueness of each case in particular. So none of what I'm saying applies to absolutely everyone, right? Because I think that we are at risk of, as professionals, shut down people's thoughts and give them the answers that we read in a book about them. The same thing that parents do with their kids, right? And the same thing that happens with ideology. A leftist ideology reads certain things from certain people, and this is the right thing for my kid. And a conservative or does the same thing. What's missing here is the singularity of the subject itself, the person, right? So we get alienated to this knowledge out there.
So what you're saying is forget what the knowledge is out there, focus on the individual. Like, what are their needs?
Yes. And the problem that comes with that, not a problem, but a challenge that comes with that, is that, again, I need certain level of healing and tolerance and acceptance of myself to be able to connect in that level with my kid. If every time I misbehave, when I was a kid, I misbehaved and I was punished very harshly, seeing my kid misbehave can be very triggering. So although I swear for my life I'm not going to be like my dad, now I'm acting exactly like him because I'm going, right? So I need to do some healing.
Oh boy, do I relate to that.
Yeah. Are those things conscious? Right? Not really, right?
Conscious? No.
Yeah.
I think on the contrary, it's unconscious. It's
yeah.
learned behavior, like mirror neurons, monkey see, monkey do. You might even not know it, but you adapt to that.
Yeah. And you repeat it. Now, what's the reason behind it? Different theories, different explanations. The one that I really dislike and I think is damaging is the genetic factor, right? Like it's not about genetics. It's about what you are saying. This is the environment that you grew up in.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Environment is very crucial.
Yeah.
For sure. What do you think about this opinion? I've heard from many platforms that dads are so important in a child's life.
Yeah, I guess a big misconception about psychoanalysis is that psychoanalysis or blames the mother, right? And I'm saying it's a misconception because psychoanalysis was evolved, is continues to evolve so much, right? And if we go to the French psychoanalysis, if we go to Lacan, right, we like he has a whole concept, the name of the father, right? It's symbolic. I don't want to get too much into the
No,
theory of
please.
it, but well, basically, he's not talking about biological mom and dad. He's talking about functions, right? But it's so crucial, the function of the father
Mhm.
in that triad, right? Now the father could be dead for what it matters, right? But is he included in the discourse of the mom, right? Something has to get in the way of the child and the mom. The mom needs to desire something else beyond the child. There has to be absence
Yeah.
and presence. And this is what we see that some other psychodynamic theories take, and they kind of like
Yeah.
created something new out of it, which is if the distance is too much, it's a problem. If the distance is not too much, it's a problem. You know, you're anxiously attached, disorganized attachment, avoidant, you know, all of these things, right? So I think the role of the father is essential. And that's why also I don't agree much with our traditional idea of role, you know, of gender roles. Because a father who is working full time, who gets home tired and who gets home frustrated because, you know,
Of a long day.
yeah, how present, even if he really wants to, how present
Yeah.
is he going to be for his
Yeah,
child?
of course. That's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
So let's be logical about it. Even though he should, but there's obviously a level of tolerance
We
there.
have limited resources.
We have limited, yeah.
Yeah, we are tired, we are exhausted, we are preoccupied with stuff. And this is important because this has been happening for generations. And we see the consequences. I have a support group for men, right? These are all different men from different backgrounds, different ages, different life stories. But you can still see these are adult, grown up people. How deep the wounds are.
From their absent fathers?
From either their, yeah, that's a big piece.
Yeah.
The absent father, physically, emotionally, whatever that is.
You can have a father that's home physically, but
Sure.
they can also be very absent.
Yeah, I can have a father who is
Yeah.
drinking vodka and passed out
Yeah.
all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
Do I have a father? Well, psychoanalysis would say, if you have, then it's a very, in that sense, a weak one, right? Like it doesn't satisfy, it doesn't fulfill the symbolic function of what a father should be.
What is your perspective of a symbolic functioning father in a home?
If we are talking about a theory, we are talking about law, rules, right?
Law and rules?
Yeah, we are not talking about authoritarian because I had like a lot of pushback on this. Like, oh, you're, you know, I'm saying like some dictatorial, authoritarian parent.
That can come into play sometimes. I mean, that's necessary at times with a good balance, I think.
Well, then that wouldn't be authoritarian, right? The authoritarian thing, it's really bad.
Not fully, yeah.
It's really bad because you are imposing
Damaging
stuff.
children for sure.
Yeah. And the problem with it is that there is no, it's not really a rule or a law. It's I'm telling
demand.
you, right? Yeah, exactly.
You have no other choice. There's no
You
freedom
do it
in that.
because I'm telling you, because I'm the adult, I'm
'Cause
more
I said
powerful.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, we grew up with that,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Because I said so.
Yeah. But why?
Yeah, right. But if there is a conversation of like, this is why, right? That changes everything, and we help kids take accountability, and they're like, you know, they may understand or they may not. In the same way, the parent has to tolerate the frustration of the kid is gonna fight against that because they don't want to do it, right? But that your job as a parent is to tolerate that.
I think that when a child proceeds to fight you on situations like that, then there's a tarnish in the leadership skills that you have as a parent.
What do you mean?
I think that so if you are a good leader, because when you're a parent, you are a leader in a sense, like you're
Sure,
leading.
sure.
So if you are in that role of leadership, if you're doing your job as a parent properly, your child should easily follow your leadership versus argue it, because essentially my idea is connecting before correcting. If you've never had a relationship with your child, you can't lead him.
Right. Who are you?
Who are you? Why should I listen to you? Oh, the eyes are going to roll, whether
Yeah.
I'm a boy or a girl. So when parents have this disconnection with their kids when they're 13, 14, I always go back to, how was your relationship? Because if you're in this fight with your kid, this battle of leadership, then you failed.
Yeah, and it depends how bad it is, right?
Yeah, and sometimes
Because-
it can get pretty nasty.
yeah,
to be
it can
honest.
be really nasty, and you're right. Sometimes I see that parents have completely neglected their roles as parents, and then the kid is 13, 14, found a group of belonging that is not the best,
Mhm.
right? And now they're misbehaving, right? Which for me, there's no such thing as misbehaving. They're behaving. They're saying something through their behavior. We as a society punish it, right?
Mhm.
And now the parent is like, my child is a problem, fix him, right? Like, okay, lucky me. I'm gonna I'm gonna fix this child.
Don't you want to fix the parent first?
I don't think
Fix.
yeah. When we talk about fixing, I always think about how in the US they talk about, like, your pet's castration. They call it like fix your dog.
Mhm.
What does that mean? What does that mean, really, right? Like,
Mhm.
cut it
Mhm.
so they don't misbehave,
Yeah.
right? Cut it so they are more regulated, they're not so active. And this is what, actually, funny enough, it means in Psychology Today. In Psychology Today, the website Psychology Today, right? It's fixing means make him or her to change his behavior so it stops being a problem for me.
Yeah, it fits the society.
Yeah,
Just like ADHD
doesn't
meds.
bother me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, the thing that I was gonna say about this kind of like dynamics is that the other extreme is really bad too, when we are trying to be friends with our kids, and that rebellion, whatever you want to call it, right? Rolling the eyes,
Mhm.
arguing, it's equally healthy and it's equally important.
I agree.
And if you don't tolerate that and you react in a very, disproportionate way, or you back up and say, like, well, do whatever you want.
Mhm.
I don't want to bother you. I'm sorry that you're feeling like that. You are absent.
Mhm.
In one way, you turn this authoritarian monster, which is, again, back to my point of the symbolic role of a parent, right?
Yeah.
You are not the law. You are just somebody who is just arbitrary, and just because you are stronger, you are imposing yourself. And on the other side, you disappear. And I had this client, 18-year-old, who told me her mom would hang out with her a lot. They would even go to nightclubs. This is Argentina. So
This was back in Argentina?
this was back in Argentina.
Mhm.
And she said, I didn't get a friend out of her, and I lost my mom.
Ooh.
Right? Yes, it seemed super cool for her friends from outside, but she lost somebody who she could fight against, as any teenager needs, right?
Yes,
Like,
a need.
yeah,
Yeah.
I need I need to know what the law is,
Yeah.
so then I can break it, right? If I don't know what the rules are, how could I rebel?
So what you're saying as a psychotherapist is that law and that rule needs to be set by the father of the home?
I say that that's kind of like the symbolic function. Now, that can be set by the mom too, or by an uncle, by whoever it is. But that's one of the things, right?
Mhm.
The other thing is that if there is no somebody, something even, right? We are not talking about a person per se, that takes away, creates a little bit of distance between mom and the child, this relationship becomes very problematic, because all the desire of mom is perhaps to create the perfect child.
Yeah.
Now, right?
Yeah.
Because there is no desire elsewhere.
Which needs to be the father, the healthy relationship.
I
in
mean,
that
yeah,
matter,
it's
I think.
psychoanalysis, so it's very kind of like stereotypical, but we could think about anything, a profession, their own health.
Career, something.
Yeah, friends,
there
whatever
has to
it
be
is.
distraction.
There has to be an absence-presence dynamic there, because if not, what's happening, and you see that a lot too, is this child doesn't have the opportunity to be a subject. They become an object of
The mother.
the missing puzzle piece for the
Yeah.
mother to be the perfect.
Yeah, and this destroys mothers because it really does mess with their mental health.
It really suppresses any subjectivity for the child.
Yeah.
Right? They don't see themselves as a separate human being.
No, they become the pleaser of mom.
Yeah, but even it's deeper than that, because you sometimes, in extreme cases, you hear them talk, and it seems like they have a walkie-talkie and mom is talking through them. They don't have a voice, right? They don't have a voice. They don't have an opinion. They don't have. It's mom that talks through them. And this is a big problem, right? Because that's kind of like almost structural then type of construction, right? Like it's a psychic structure that it's already built different. So it's really hard to deal with that.
Going back to our men topic,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of off topic, but it's a podcast, we can do that. I was watching a documentary on Netflix, and it was about the notorious pedophiles of California. And they interviewed one of them. I forgot his name. I'll try to remember, and I'll link it because I know people are going to ask for the documentary. But they were asking this monster how he chose his victims, and particularly children. He loved to molest children. And so they were asking him these questions, and he said, I would drive up to schools for several weeks. I would sit in my car and I would just watch kids. And the way I chose my victims were I observed the fathers of these children. And if the father was not a threat, I would not go after the kid. But if the father was a threat, I would not even think once to get near that kid. So this monster chose the kids who had the weaker dads or the absent dads. And so that's why I always ask the question of how important a father's role is. And so if a man needs to have that look, that tough look, that intimidating look, then do it, because this is what protects children. You know?
I mean, it's a very singular case, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. But it's still, like, in many cases, I mean, like, look at to anybody you talk to, like the image of a man, like I don't mean by look, height, nothing like that, but like the way that a man carries himself is so essential, because that really opens doors for either people to take advantage or not. It's just such a big role that a man has.
Then we are in a very messed up society.
We are.
Right?
We are,
Like,
though. That's the whole idea. Yeah. We are,
you know,
because it throws all the psychology out the door. But
to generalize this, I find it a little bit dangerous, and I will tell you why.
What dangerous?
To take an example like this, and it makes complete sense, right? Like, if of course, like the guy, he's a pedophile, but he's not an idiot. Like, you know, he's not gonna risk it with a guy who is gonna kick his ass, right? Like, that's very simple.
Pretty much short and simple, yeah.
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, why would he? Why would he? But there are many more deeper questions to ask there. But without getting into that, when we start to talk about looks and how that can affect the behavior of some other person, there was a very interesting study, because there was many cases of women being raped after they would go to a nightclub and they would take a cab or something, you know, public transportation, or especially it was basically in their way home. 5, 6. It was in Argentina, but it happens here too.
Yeah.
Just like this study in particular was from it wasn't a study, it was what was happening actually. But the study was about, there was a lot of discourses about, well, if they dress like that, if they're kind of drunk, if they this, if they that, then of course something is going to happen to them, right? So it was almost like an obvious thing. If they are wearing a short dress, if they are using high heels, if they are kind of drunk, of course men are going to want to rape them. This was what was being circulated. Of course, the woman was becoming the problem again, right? Like it was because the way they dressed that the man allowed himself to rape her.
You don't think that's the case?
Well, this is the study that actually showed that women who were dressed professionally with their hair done and all of, more conservatively, were more prone to be attacked by,
Really?
right, because it wasn't about the sexuality in the sense of, like, we understand, like, sexualized body. It was about power, domination, right? It was about that.
So the more conservative, the more you show that you're in power and domination? Is that
So
what it was saying?
so the more kind of like exciting for the guy or for the rapist to
Ah.
dominate this person, right? The worst thing that could happen for a rapist is for a woman to want it. This is the study, right? I'm not claiming any expertise in this,
No.
but like,
Yeah.
this was what the conversation was, how we can fall into these assumptions that a woman dressing provocative or sensual, right, is gonna
Is
attract,
asking for it.
is asking for it, right? And the study was like, well, no, not really.
So the one that's not, the rapist is finding it more exciting because
Right.
it's not a want.
Yes,
That is so interesting.
there's more of imposing their will over the other, right?
And this was happening in Argentina.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying, and none of this is universal law.
Yeah, of course.
There are cases and cases, but I'm saying, like, there are some sick people out there that gonna hurt others. We can get into the mental health conversation and see why did they end up this way. You can get into the kind of like my personal life. I'm worried about my sister, my wife, my family, my kids. So I have like certain emotions and certain reaction to this. Or we can go the law and what we should be doing. It's a very complex conversation. But what is it's kind of hard to do is kind of like to generalize the this guy that you were mentioning and say, like, this is the thing, because this is gonna sound kind of dumb, but what if some other guy feels more challenging and more exciting to do it,
To have a thing, but dad.
yeah,
Well, that could be too.
right? So
That could be too.
that could be too. It's very hard to predict, and again, this is kind of like back to my point of, we are a very obsessive society and we try to get answers for everything, and we just don't understand that there's a lot of situations that are very case by case.
Well,
right?
we're not going to, because everyone's so different.
Yeah.
And it's, you just, I mean, like, look at it this way. What does make a healthy man? Like,
Okay, right. That's a good question.
what does a healthy man look like?
What does make a healthy person, human, woman? What
Sure.
right? It's a very tough question to answer. Like,
Why do you think it's tough to answer?
Because it has so many components, right? There is no one way in which you could qualify a healthy man. Like, each person, most of the population is pretty healthy, right?
Here?
Everywhere. Most people are not. There is high percentages of mental health issues. I agree with that. But most of the people are doing pretty okay, right? Otherwise, it would be like in a, this would be
A movie,
catastrophic. Yeah. And yet they are all so different from each other. They all have lives that are so different, right? And I think my respect to each of these men's path towards healing and towards conducting a healthy life, for me, it's very important, right? Because even I was thinking about these discourses out there about the biology of it, right? Like the man and the woman's different, right? And how that is tied to personality traits.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear this a lot from Jordan Peterson, right? And
I know you're not a fan.
I'm not a fan. I am a really big fan of Slavoj Žižek,
I know.
right? I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson just because his claims pretend to be supported by data that doesn't exist. So his whole claim of agreeableness or agreeability,
Be a less agreeable person.
yeah, women are less agreeable, are more agreeable than men, right? What he doesn't say when he talks about this is that yes, like the score in agreeability for women is higher than men, but on average, there are more men who are more agreeable than women, and in average, women are less agreeable than men. There is a peak. If you see the graph in the research, there's a peak higher for women in their level of agreeability. But the graph for men, it's wider, right? So there's many more men who are more agreeable than women. So this kind of like discourses that he just preaches and this kind of like normative of, then from there you move to what things are manly to do, what things are more, womanly, or those are the things that hurt.
Hurt who?
Hurt men, hurt women.
Why do you think that hurts men and women?
Because you are creating very rigid stereotypes of what millions of different people, different men from different cultures should all behave like, no matter what their life story is, no matter what their social economical situation is, no matter if they are gay or straight, no matter anything.
It's very controlled.
Yeah, I mean,
But don't you think that people need guidance? That's
how is that guiding?
well, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So let's bring kids up, okay? Maybe like teenagers, 20s, whatever.
Sure.
So when people don't have a set of laws, regulations, they tend to have no sense of direction. And what happens if you give people too much freedom? Okay, let's just say there are no rules and regulations for any age. How is that person going to find their way?
That would be horrible.
Right. So there has to be I understand when sometimes it could be a little bit extreme, like some certain psychologists, what they talk about, like Jordan Peterson, he can get a little extreme, right?
Well, my point is that he claims some scientific universal truth. As a thinker, as a human being, and not that I matter, right? But okay.
You matter.
Well, but compared to somebody as famous as him, he's not going to sit and debate.
How do you
with
know
me.
what this reel is going to be? Maybe it'll get like 5.5
Maybe,
million.
right? That would be great.
Then you will be the next.
But we have to think about what are the implications of the discourse that he's creating. And for me, nothing good really comes from that. That's my problem. Now, if the data shows what year, what data, like this research that I'm saying, it was the young, who was that? There were three guys. I can remember the young, and they review like a bunch of researches about these claims that about personality traits and men and women, right? The overlap is so big. It's so big that there's no point really in getting into this. Men are born to be fighters and leaders and whatever, and women are born to agree and nurture, and it's just not true.
Why not?
Because the claim is that that's genetic. The claim is that that's biological.
Yeah, we're born into our roles.
Right.
That's not true.
I don't think it's true. I think it's you can see how it has changed. You can see how when it's needed that discourse shifts a little bit to accommodate, right? Yeah, I mean, our physical, biological differences, totally agree. Yeah, of course, we are two different. Even looking from a psychoanalytic perspective, femininity and masculinity are completely different things, not compatible, and anything like that. Very, very different things. But to call the roles that society has deemed normal for men and women as a biological fact is just not true. This is my problem with these discourses that try to universalize. And what that creates is damage for those who don't fit that kind of thing.
What kind of damage?
Well, again,
Suicidality.
emasculation. Well, suicidality is a big thing. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
like 70% of suicides were men, right? It's very concerning. Now, emasculation. If we are thinking about manhood and as something that should tolerate whatever, and should, this man should perform and should be a man no matter what. This is where the discourses like boys don't cry come from, right?
Mm.
You shouldn't be complaining. You shouldn't be too vulnerable. You shouldn't be I don't know, talking about emotions with your. I have seen men having a hard time being, affectionate with their daughter. They feel troubled with that idea,
Mm.
right? Why? The best things that I see is when fathers dress like princesses and they dance with their kids or
I've
whatever,
seen
right?
those, yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The problem is that somebody would say, that's not a man.
But that's so different. I feel like those things are so different. Like a father at home dressing like a princess to play tea party with his daughter. I think it's so beautiful. It's vulnerable, and it's I think it's accepted. It's beautiful. But anything beyond that, I don't know. It's
What would be beyond that?
to dress like that outside.
Well, I have seen
And
that
to be
in
claiming
a,
that as,
at
you're
a
a
school
woman is,
presentation, right?
yeah, I've seen those.
Right. So, this daughter.
I mean, like adapting that as your new lifestyle is a little
Well,
troubling
yeah, I'm
for
guessing
me.
that these parents are not pretending to be
Yeah.
Disney princesses, right?
Yeah.
but for
Yeah.
me, I can see how strong the connection between that father and this daughter can be, because this dad didn't worry about what are others gonna think, what I should do as a father. And I'm not saying that this father even like thought about this. Perhaps he just did it like, instinctively, but he talked the language of his daughter,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Her daughter imagined that his dad is a princess. His dad was like, okay, let's
Yeah.
be a prince.
That's a true man to me.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
It is amazing. It is beautiful. And when I say dads are important, I mean like, and the patriarchal man is important, not because I want them to be, or I have this idea of, beat your wife, beat your kids. No, but, not the dads from like the 1930s, 40s that don't kiss you and say, I love you, beat you, but the dads that are speaking the child's language and they love their child and they play with their child.
But those are not patriarchal dads.
Which ones?
Those dads that
The
you're
im-
mentioning.
There could be. You don't think so? There can be
I-
like a
I-
very strong man, but also at home is very, very like sensitive and is comfortable to be
Right, but
dressed in tutus with his daughter.
I mean, my idea of like the typical patriarchal, macho guy.
That's our dads.
Yeah, well, my dad is an artist, so I grew up in a family that yes, he was like that pretty much. USSR education,
Mhm.
and that's systemic
Mhm.
authoritarian dictatorship has implication in
Oh, yeah.
micro, in a micro level too.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I would see, my uncles, my, again, these things of like, I'm the man of the house, right? And they,
Yeah.
right. And I hear this a lot. Like in my times, we would never talk back to our parents,
Yeah.
right? Why was that so great? what are we proud of? Maybe you should have without being punished for it, right?
Yeah, I don't think that that's respect. I think that's fear. I
It's
think that
fear.
anything that you fear, like most people would think that that's respecting your parent, but essentially you're going to grow up and be 30. Are you still going to respect your parent to that level of, you
And
know?
and talking about like kids, right? Um, and I'm sure like this is completely anecdotal. I haven't done the research to be honest, but um, you see how kids who, and perhaps women more, it's more clear for to see it in women who grew up in families where the dad was, very kind of harsh and authoritarian and even abusive. They kind of like build a similar relationship with their partner,
Yeah.
right? So is that really a good thing? Do these parents want their kids to find somebody like that, right? And I know our culture is very special in many ways, but um, you create an idea like a matrix of what a man is, right? You create an idea of what love looks like, and it's really hard to change that, right? If
Hmm.
um, love means distance, rejection, love means punishment, love means
Hmm.
not speaking my mind, love means that I have to neglect myself to constantly satisfy the other person, then most probably anything outside of that, I'm not going to know what to do with it. This is what is familiar, this is what I'm used to, this is
Hmm.
uh, and there's an entire system that applauds me for that, right? So why wouldn't I choose that?
Hmm.
Am I happy really in that relationship? Most probably not. But why not? Right? And can I voice my pain now? And that's the biggest challenge for men and women too. Like for the first time, people in their 50s, 60s getting into therapy saying, I can't believe I'm just starting to talk about this. I've never allowed myself to even have doubts about this. Uh, I think that's great progress. Now, the piece about the victimization that you were saying, I think you're really, really into something very important there. And I wouldn't exclusively talk about men about that. I would say we are creating the narcissistic society.
Hmm.
We are encouraging that. And
Yeah.
it's what do we hear a lot? And there's no judgment for me like on what each person decides to do in their relationship or not. But what I see is a lot of discourses out there of this is what a healthy relationship is. That's why I feel so hesitant to say what is a healthy relationship, what is a healthy man, right? Because I feel like I don't have that power, I don't have that knowledge to determine that. But we see discourses about a loving relationship or a healthy relationship is a relationship that satisfies your needs. Okay. And if it doesn't, then it's toxic. Then you should leave that person. Then you should find somebody else, or perhaps you should, whatever, engage in some open relationship
Hmm.
so you can have your needs, your needs met somewhere else. Great. If it works for you, great. I would say most of the time, what they don't talk about is that unless it's an extreme situation, well, first of all, your needs are going to remain unsatisfied no matter if you are wherever you are, right?
No matter who you're with,
Yeah, no matter who you're with.
where you go.
Because nobody is that missing
No.
puzzle piece that you feel like
Yeah,
you're going to,
exactly.
right?
That's portrayed out there.
Right.
Find the one.
Yeah, and the, what is it called? Like your soulmate,
Hmm.
right? Um, and then the problem with that is you're also creating somebody who thinks that whatever they feel and whatever they experience is the only thing that matters, right?
Say that again.
So you're creating a society where each individual thinks that whatever they feel, they perceive is the only thing that matters.
Yeah, very I.
Very I.
Very, very I driven. That's the narcissistic society that you're
I don't
talking
think
about
so.
that. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And even
I
talk
agree with you.
about narcissism, like why are narcissists depicted as somebody who wants to be successful, manipulative, whatever? Because those are the values that the society
Right.
appreciates. If the narcissist, well, it wouldn't be narcissist, right? But if we grew up in a society where what is valued is caring about the other, about being generous, about being honest, about if we're truly creating a society where we are not idealizing these, guys in internet that are like just showing their expensive cars and mistreating others. I'm wondering if the idea of success changes, would a narcissist still pursue that, right? Because what a narcissist does is pursue an image that they think that it's loved and admired by society. Also very demonized, the narcissist, because nobody talks about when a narcissistic person then has these episodes of depression are really bad,
Of course,
right?
there's a lot of
Because
trauma behind that.
yeah, because they don't love themselves.
No.
They love the image and they try to be
Yes.
the image, right?
Yeah.
So what I see a lot in the men that I talk to is talking about relationships, is that they are experiencing that thing. My partner is asking me for stuff, and I'm working really, really hard to give everything she wants or he wants. And I always fall short. And I always feel like a failure. Right. And one would say, well, what are you doing in that relationship? Right. But this dynamic works for both of them. Right. Because as long as the partner can criticize them, this is working. Is it a happy, healthy relationship? No, but it's working. And as long as they can have something to work on to improve their relationship, that's working too. The moment you assume that the happiness of the other person is not your job, that you can support, you can be there, but it's not your job to make anybody happy, then things change. But most of the time, if the relationship is not treated, this ends up in rupture, right? And this is something that I learned from my own analysis. My psychoanalyst, said something along the lines of the most difficult thing to do for you, and I think it's for everyone, but he was talking to me, is to accept that no matter what you do, you cannot keep your parents fully happy. You're always going to be a little bit disappointing, right? And that was something to grieve for me, right? Like that was something to let go, but also incredibly freeing. It wasn't because I was powerless, but it was an impossible task that I had in front of me, right? So, okay, I had to study a career to make them happy. I'm studying the career. Okay, it's getting too late to get married. Okay, now I have to focus on marriage, right? Oh, but we don't like this woman. You be like this woman. Okay, now I have to focus on this one. Oh, but your career. Okay, now this, right? But somebody else studied a different career and they're making much more money, right? And now you're never home. Why, and so the demands never end. And what our responsibility is, well, sorry, I need to live my life.
But how long did it take you to, or any person, right?
Sometimes they never get to that point.
Sometimes you never get to that point. Yeah.
And really you try to satisfy, then your parents are not there anymore. And now you keep doing the same with your partner.
Yeah. And it's transferred onto your children and so on.
Yeah.
It's so damaging.
It really is. And the fact that we talk so much about the men's performance, because we rarely talk about the woman's performance. Beyond, if we are talking about the traditional kind of like patriarchal discourses, cook, clean, take care of the kids, right? As if that's what a woman is, and when we're talking about men, we are talking about performance. Performance at work, sexually, protecting. So if you're performing the best you can and you still cannot make your partner happy, that can be incredibly emasculating.
Yeah. I was reading, I would say maybe about 2 years ago, there was an article that was done on men and performance.
Hmm.
And it was quite interesting. In the article stated that men, because they don't have a space to communicate, like a man cannot go to his friend and say, "Hey, George, I feel sad today. I'm not feeling well. I got into a fight with, Donna," because then George is gonna, look at you like, "What's going on here, man?" Like, click, he's gonna hang up on you. So the safest space for a man to communicate is through sex, intimacy.
Oh,
And it was quite interesting because I'm like, that makes sense to me because there's not enough space. I mean, where can men go to speak freely like that? I don't feel well. I have anxiety today. I'm sad. I've been feeling depressed. There's not enough, places like that for men to go, whether it's your wife, whether it's your friends, because you have this image that you need
yeah.
to keep. So the only place that men can be vulnerable, let's just use that word, vulnerable to that state, is the bedroom, because performance is also a way of communicating. It's a language. So this is why a lot of men were classified as sex addicts.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, sex is very. I think sex and intimacy are
Yeah.
very, very um, symbolic of what's going on
Hmm.
elsewhere, right?
Right? It's a way of expressing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
the interesting thing is, I rarely see a relationship that is falling apart and the sex is great. And I also rarely see a relationship that is amazing and sex is
yeah,
failing. Now, it can happen,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But usually there is such level of, well, we are literally most of the time naked in front of each other, right?
Hmm.
Symbolically naked too.
Yeah.
And what happens when um, you get criticized in bed,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? What happens
Yeah.
when, because again, going to my point, like, Lacan would say there's no sexual relationship, but the whole point is we are not compatible, right? Woman sexuality and men's sexuality are very, very different. And certainly men are kind of more basic, right? But like generally speaking, it's really hard to read any book that would give you the tools
Yeah.
to satisfy any woman or any
A
woman.
sense of direction.
Yeah.
Why do you think that there's such pressure on men? I feel like when, and speaking clinically, when men are performing well, they're criticized and they're labeled as sex addicts. And when they're not, they're labeled as, absent. There's always this pressure on men in the performance area.
Hmm.
Is this unhealthy for men? Like,
Yes, yeah, of course. And I mean, I'm hesitant to say that performance, like good performance, whatever that means, in each case is very different.
mhm. Yeah, for
Uh,
every relationship, it's different.
yeah, and I worked with some couples who were coming. I was in the psychosomatic unit in Buenos Aires, right? So there were some people who were dealing with issues related to intimacy and sex. So we were always thinking about like these standards out there. You have to last 15 minutes or more for a woman to get to orgasm, right? And all of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I saw people where a woman got to the orgasm in 2 minutes. For her, to those extra 13 minutes, it's just
Gnarly and torture, I'm
yeah,
sure.
right. Like just like
Yeah.
let's put Netflix and watch something, right? Like we have done, we
That's
have
so
done, we
funny.
have accomplished our
Yeah.
mission. We
Yeah.
we can say we are a healthy couple because we have
Yeah.
sex 3 times a week, right? And let's move on with
Is
our
that the
life.
healthy limit, you think, clinically?
No, that's bullshit. But like
It's different for every couple,
it's
I feel
very
like.
different stages in life,
Yeah.
levels of stress that we are
Yeah, that's very true.
experiencing. um, it's really context, right? Like
Yeah.
I was working with a family where they were living 7 people in a 1 bedroom
Oh
apartment.
my goodness. Yeah.
Can you imagine any kind of
Yeah.
intimacy in that context? Really,
Yeah.
really hard.
Very hard, yeah. And
Yeah.
I can imagine the stress on the relationship too.
Yeah. But the piece about the performance is very important because it's not something that the couple talks about. It's something that is assumed that the man should know
Well, Tigran, sorry to cut you off, but men are very loud about that. I mean, like
about what
sex.
are
They're
they.
very. I mean,
Well,
the
you know what they say about being loud, right? If you're being too loud about something, is because you don't want to be talking about something else, right?
that could
So
be, yeah.
I would
It's
say
just portrayed very out loud.
I think that's kind of like a fantasy that I have heard out there, like men gather and talk about sex and porn and all of these things. I have never experienced that with my friends. Perhaps I
Really.
have, like,
Maybe
very
you have really professional.
maybe. Yeah, I
You
am
know,
very lucky with my friends.
not even in loud in that sense, but how often do you hear, younger, ladies in their 20s, men in their 20s, you're talking, I mean, the dating scene is horrible right now for anyone
For
that's
yeah,
single.
yeah.
It's really, really bad. And so when you talk to females, I mean, I've had a few coaching clients that I've met. They're like, the men, all they want is sex. You go out with them, the second day, they're already making moves. And it's not just one case.
Hmm.
There's like hundreds I'm talking about.
Okay.
So I think that's what I'm saying. Like it's portrayed so loud that when you're trying to look at other factors of men, the only thing that you can think about is, oh, are they going to want this? Is this the only thing that's
Oh,
in their mind?
yeah. Well,
And that's disheartening because that's what they're putting out there.
I mean, we are falling again into a generalization, but because I have received the same.
About women?
Uh, I have received the same about women saying, like, they are taking it too slow,
That too, yeah.
right? And
That too.
what I'm hearing in both cases is they are both trying to follow certain universal standard that they have in their mind of how it should be. And it's very unfortunate because then you have women who force themselves to have sex in the first date when even
Yeah.
they didn't feel comfortable.
Right.
And you also have men who perhaps are also not comfortable,
Yeah.
but they have to be a man, so that's what a man does in their mind, right? And sometimes both of them just want to have sex and that's it, and
Yeah.
that's fine, right? So
That's fine.
I mean, if they are two adults, consenting adults,
Yeah,
they
you
want to
can't have
hang out
anything
and
to say
have
about
sex, they have fun,
Yeah.
good for them, but I would say that kind of sex and the sexual relationship,
Yeah.
it's a little bit different.
Yeah, you guys are very different.
Yeah, there is like that emotional
Yeah.
connection that
And that's what people should strive for sure.
I mean,
I'm a
for
little
me,
judgmental when it comes to things like that because it's safer and healthier versus going out there and spreading your wings everywhere. It's not a really
sure,
healthy
your
thing to.
wings.
Yeah.
Uh, your wings.
It's just healthier
I, I, I mean, I would
to
assume
be.
that yeah, it kind of like reduces certain
Yeah.
risks of, but overall, the whole thing about the sexual relationship that I do care about is that it has also turned into some kind of indication of how healthy or not your relationships based on some absurd standards out there, right?
Hmm.
The frequency, how long you last, how many positions, and this
Oh
and
yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And some relationships now feel guilty because they just don't want to have sex, right? And it's
Yeah. Or
fine.
they don't want to do those things.
Right, right. And the performance piece for the men, um, I think I think usually, and perhaps when we are teenagers, we will talk about these things. But as we grow up, I think that men are more and more reserved. I think that women are more vocal about how they feel
Very.
in their sexual
Yeah.
experience, and men are more reserved because most of the time, and this is a big damage that I see in like newer generations of social media, access to pornography, right? So damaging
What
because,
about dating sites?
Well,
Don't you think they're damaging?
I don't like them because just the gist of it, like you are kind of like going through a
Yeah.
catalog of something. It's
What about the
horrible.
other piece?
What are these?
Well, um, when did you get married? What year?
I'm not married. I'm engaged.
Oh, you're engaged. Sorry.
Yeah.
But when you met your fiance,
Mhm.
was it on a dating site?
No.
Okay.
It was through a
So,
friend.
exactly. It was through friends. So, imagine the level of work you had to do to pursue her. You had to think about what to say. You had to build the courage to say it. You had to take her out. You had to make conversation. Nowadays, everything is done digitally. So men don't have that level of courage to really go up to a girl anymore and ask them on a date. Would you like to have coffee with me? Would you like to have dinner with me? Everything is swipe left or swipe right. What is that going to do to a man?
I think
Since we're talking about men, I'm not saying it doesn't happen with
because
women.
it's
but
exactly the
topic
same
is
for
men.
women, but
Yeah.
for men, I think that the anxiety about the actual because there is excitement and they want to meet in person, of course, and I think that this consistent narrative of like men just want to party, it's kind of crap. Like I see the men that I work with, and they really want a good relationship,
I have
right? Like most of the men that I've
relatives.
met,
Yeah, exactly.
they want that. They
I
they
think so
crave for
too.
that emotional connection.
I think so too. Yeah.
What I see happening, not only in sexual relationships, but like romantic relationships, but also like in friendships, in-person contact. Perhaps the pandemic had something to do with it too. Has become highly anxiety provoking
For men going pursuing women.
for men, pursuing women for sure, but for people in general too. Just like think about teenagers making friends. The level of isolation that kids have now in their 15, 16, the teenagers, right? Even young adults, they feel inadequate. They feel like this social anxiety. They are worried about what to say. They are worried. We were lucky enough to not grow up in that context, and I would say it's a very LA thing too, because I have like people that I work that are from New York or from these big cities, and the level of conversation is different. You just interact with the same. You take the public transportation, so you maybe see the same people every day, so you talk. It's much more, let's call it like natural. It flows differently. Now here in LA is like, oh no, he called me, right? Why are you calling me? Just text me.
Yeah.
Okay, unless I'm busy, I hate when I'm busy and they call me for sure, but I'm not terrified of a call.
Yeah, you don't just ignore because you don't want to talk.
Yeah, right. Like, and it has become a joke.
Yeah.
But like the pizza delivery comes and people are hiding, right? Because it's not even funny.
That's factual, though.
Yeah.
You don't want to open the door to the Uber driver or the Amazon. I mean, before it was just greeting. Now that's not even. So it's that same concept for dating sites. Like men don't have that driving force anymore to pursue. And I think that's
they
hurting.
pursue a lot, and I think the problem with that, and I see both sides again. I'm saying both sides because I do work with a lot of men, but I also work with a lot of women, right? And the discourses are interestingly very, very similar. The narrative of their stories, they are very, very similar. This, I think, one of the most painful things is, let's say that, okay, if you didn't match, it's fine. You go by your day and you keep scrolling until you match, right? I think as problematic as that is, it's kind of like a necessary tool for LA because that's kind of like the culture that we are living in now.
Yeah.
But when they start to talk and you don't have the same level of accountability because you haven't met the person, and then one day you decide that you don't want to respond, not for a second you stop to think, I'm going to hurt this person's feelings, right? And this happens equally for men and women. But I have seen, we're talking about men, I have seen a lot of men get hurt. Like, I thought we were connecting, we were talking so, like, it was going so well. and she just like ghosted me.
Oh yeah.
That's horrible, and
Yeah.
and if there's a conversation like, hey, I think this is not going anywhere, we should talk to other
Yeah,
people.
transparency, a level
Yeah,
of transparency.
so you can have some level of
Yeah.
closure. It hurts your ego, whatever, you move on.
That's that empathy though. That's the scary thing.
Well, how much empathy you can create if
Over
you
the
are
screen.
scrolling,
Like, yeah.
Again, I'm going to sound super judgmental with this, but there is a difference. There is a difference when the person that you are talking to has my clients that I started to work during the pandemic, they see me in person for the first time, and they most of the time they say, oh, you have like a body, below your, like, yeah, it's a joke, of course,
Yeah,
but
but
like,
that's what they saw, of course.
and something changes in the relationship from there on.
Yeah, it does.
Even if I see them just one time,
Yeah.
the level of connection
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
changes.
I agree with you.
Right?
I agree with you.
So when I did this men's support group, something that every man was excited about is that it was going to be in person. They crave for that place, right?
Yeah.
They can be vulnerable with other men. They can witness each other's stories. Older men can give some advice to younger men. Some can relate to similar situations, similar experiences. What is very different from individual therapy is that you have other people kind of like listening to you, and that has some power in it. I as a therapist, I cannot say, well, good job on that. You should. That's not my job. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to inflate anybody's ego. I'm not going to give advice. But others can say, wow, like you did this. That's amazing. And that can be, you see them, like they lighten up. They,
Of course.
they change. So the fact that I can meet with different men from different cultures all together in the same place, and we can discuss such intimate things like relationships, sex, addictions,
They
whatever.
need that.
They
need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They
And
need
none
that.
of them feels like less of a man.
No, that's
Right.
what I'm saying to you. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
As long as you don't fall into that victim and then take that with you everywhere, you have every right to feel. Just do what you need to do as a man, as a
Yeah.
human being. Like, be the provider for the family, work, be there for your wife, be sad. Feel those things, but just don't let that take over you. And because I've seen this more than like 4 cases. I can't work because of this. I'm not good enough. It's like, no, like you can't fall into that state. Like, work on yourself. You have a family to take care of now, and your children are dependent on you. Yes, they are. Your wife is also. So you have a responsibility. Just like women, we can have postpartum depression, but we get healed and we move on.
Yeah.
We struggle.
If they receive help.
Yeah, receive the help. Absolutely. And
ask for that.
Ask for that. And I'm very, very grateful. And I'm seeing a lot of men that are asking for help. I think I'm very proud of our culture for that.
Yeah.
We've come a long way. And it's not easy.
And that's why these courses, like we were talking about Jordan Peterson, I feel like they are kind of like pulling us back again to that place of, as a man, you are a naturally born leader, right? What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I'm working at this like supermarket 12 hours a day to try to pay my rent. What does that even mean? Or like,
Yeah.
you are in a relationship and your wife is making more money than you. What does that mean? Right? And these are the kind of like the rigid things that I feel like when we are talking about these men who actually ask for help, you're saying, yeah, you don't need to feel bad for it. You don't need to feel weak for it. But that's you, that's me, right? That's some people. When you open social media, and I'm naming social media a lot today because I feel like it's damaging, it's very hurtful, hurting people. You don't see that. You see like
the opposite.
I mean, you have the pants, man. Like, just deal with it, right? You see that a lot. You see
You
that.
do. There's definitely pressure to be the best, to be the hustler,
The alpha, whatever.
the alpha, but I do understand where you're coming from, and I am agreeing with you on a certain extent. Okay, let's just say those things aren't present, and then what?
What things? The social media and all
No,
that.
let's say you don't have to be the alpha male. You don't have to hustle. You don't have to be that breadwinner, that patriarchal dad. Let's throw those out for a minute. What else is left for men?
Everything.
Like what?
Absolutely everything.
Like what?
Like
Name
be a caring, loving husband for your
You
wife.
don't think those things can be present in a hustling man?
Well, but they're not talked about. They are. I mean, they can absolutely be present, but they're not talked about.
So your whole thing is just talk about it.
Well,
Bring
if
it up.
If you're gonna make priority, let's be like very kind of. I'm gonna be very absurd here, but what defines?
We like that here.
Okay,
Bring it up.
What defines an alpha man
Yeah.
is not how caring and loving is with his wife.
Said who?
Said the guys who talk about alpha men. Alpha men is like you have to have 6-packs, expensive cars. And
I've heard alpha men say that I care more about my family than myself.
Is that a good thing?
I mean, we are talking about care.
Yeah,
So now-
but it's kind of like that self-sacrificing crap. I mean, you need to take care of yourself to be able to take care of your family. That's just it. You know, the moment that you lost yourself into some kind of idea of, as a man, I have to work 15 hours a day and give them everything that they ask me, otherwise I'm failing. Well, do you think that's sustainable? You know, how long can you do that for?
Not to that level.
Right?
But let's just say, let's bring up Andrew Tatum.
Okay.
I know you can't stand him, but let's just talk about it.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great topic. He's a good conversation and somebody to have a debate about. But so he is very macho and he talks about, I don't believe in depression. How many times have you heard him say that? A lot. I think people who are depressed are weak. I don't believe in depression. You know, I've heard him say this in multiple reels, multiple podcasts. And so I personally don't believe in that. I think that depression definitely does exist and it is present in a lot of males. So, and I've also heard him say that he cares about his partner a lot. He cares about his children tremendously. He cares about his brother, his mother, and he works very hard to provide. But he never said anything about, oh my God, I'm neglecting myself, so and so. All I care about is my abs. But that's portrayed differently now. See, that's him as being a, misogynistic, alpha male that's pretending to care, whatever. I think that when we remove those things, like be a hustler, be the, be that type of man for what else is left for the man? I can think there's, that love and that love and that care. Okay, but what else?
What else?
Yeah.
I mean, again,
it's just love and care.
No, well, is that not a lot? Like, how many of us would have dreamed? How many of my clients, I can think, how many of Armenians or Latinos would have wished for a loving and caring father?
I would have loved for a loving, caring father who works and who is
But why would they stop working?
No, but I'm saying, like, if we take out this strong hustling type of men that we're talking about that's hurting today's
this
society.
Is what I think. I don't think our society now in our system can afford not hustling, because we would be all like,
But that's what they're talking about. That
Who?
This Jordan Peterson and all the other psychologists, that's what they're motivating. Like, okay, you can be a loving person, be a loving, but that's not enough.
I think you have such a gracious reading of them. I don't hear that a lot from them.
Tell me what you hear.
I hear from them.
Thank you for calling me gracious.
Yeah, no. You have a very gracious take or like reading of them, because what I hear a lot is fundamentally a very, let's go back to what we are made biologically to do and what the Bible says we should do, and
that's
for some
direction.
reason comparing us to some Neanderthals that lived,
Mm-hmm.
it's completely absurd. Like, we have nothing to, what are we talking about? Like, there's women need protection. Every woman wants protection.
Yeah.
What if not every woman? And
You think
these are
so?
studies about this. Um, the how women choose their object of love
Uh-huh.
changes depending level of education, age,
Uh-huh.
financial situation, if they have been married or not before,
Mhm.
if they have kids or not before, right? Cultural aspect. So I actually remember this reading because it was a course about evolutionary psychology. So it was all about how we have been biologically programmed to choose our partner, and every single study was debunking that. There is not a piece of biological, ancestral kind of thing that a woman sees a man and it's like, oh, he's gonna protect me from the wild animals that are gonna attack me, so I'm gonna choose him, or I'm gonna keep the fire alive when he's going hunting.
Mhm.
We have we are cultural beings. Uh, we are symbolic beings. The biological piece exists always,
Mhm.
but over that we have built so much more that talk about those things, like they are determining what a man or what a woman should do. It just doesn't make sense. That's why people like, what's his name, Matt Walsh, or at least
Mhm.
like these guys, right? They bring up questions that in the face value they seem so like obvious, like
Like, what
common
is a
sense.
woman?
What is a woman, right?
Mhm.
The problem is not the question. The question is great. The problem is that he never read anything about the thousands of philosophical and psychological explanations of the
Mhm.
differences between the sexes. Beyond his ignorance, the problem is also that he's not trying to just ask a genuine question. He's trying to push certain way of seeing
Which
things.
has worked for us, you don't think?
How well it has worked.
Very well. I mean, look at the society now. Look,
Okay, so this is the society that we have.
yeah, right now it's a shit show.
Okay, when wasn't a shit show?
Okay, so let's go back.
Mhm.
So you know how we were talking about like our dads, and you said, back then dads coped with like too much work and drinking. Yeah, these things are still present. But to this level,
You have certain lightness to talk about how abusive and alcoholic, and our grand. How old were your grandparents when they passed?
how old were they?
Yeah.
80. One of them was 84, 70 something, recently 91, and then 80 something. Yeah.
Okay,
In their late 80s and 90s.
that's a pretty long life for what the average of Armenians of that generation lives.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think they live pretty much longer than what we have
My
now.
grandparents died in their one younger, but the other one was 69.
From
The
like tragic
heart
death?
attack. No. He was a chain smoker. Like, of course, what do you expect,
Yeah.
right? But what I'm
Because
trying.
they had a life, like difficult life. Is that what
Well,
you mean by what do you
why do you
expect?
think? Why do you think that these things that we are talking about that are so against traditional, normatives
Because people want the
emerged?
freedom to live how they want.
Okay.
Because those ideologies, that pressure, that mentality doesn't really work for them anymore. When in reality, things weren't as bad before as they are now. Yes, we had communism. Yes, we had a little bit more control, but
We had like normalized child abuse.
but we do now as well. We have
No.
more suicidality than we did.
No,
Because people
what?
are confused about where they are, who they are.
Okay, so
It's too much
I
freedom,
agree
I
with
think.
that. It's not about freedom, but it's about questions that
It's
we have.
about rules, regulations, values, and morals. You don't think?
What rules and regulations?
Well,
Like that's where it's all different, right? Like you have depending on culture, religious belief, ideology. Those are different rules and regulations.
yeah, for every culture it's different.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, let's put all cultures together. Now, I feel like the mental health rate is greater than
The
before
issues?
was.
Well, because the research is also greater. Until a couple of decades ago, there
How?
was absolutely no research in a meaningful way of what we are dealing with.
I mean, okay.
I mean,
Okay, I can say, I'll
there's
agree
much
with you.
more,
Can't argue with logic.
but yeah, I mean,
Research wasn't there, but we heard.
your
Where
parent
did you
tell
hear?
your dad, why don't you go to a psychologist? I'm not crazy. I will tell my mom I'm a psychologist. Well,
I
I was
told my dad that. You know what his answer was? I've learned to cope with it.
okay.
I've learned to manage myself and heal and cope with it. I don't know. I feel yes, there are some men in older generation smoking, heart attacks, cancers, but my whole thing is what those therapists and psychologists are preaching is something was working before
Sure.
that is not now. And I think when people are given when a 17-year-old is given so much freedom, he's not going to know what to do with that freedom.
hmm
Children or just people in general, when they're given too much freedom, it's like giving an 18-year-old $2 million. People who have won the lottery, what's the history behind that? I mean, look at all the documentaries. They've all failed. Because you cannot give a mediocre class from Arkansas $360 million. He's not going to know how to manage that money.
So the problem is not only freedom, but with that freedom, certain abandonment of the person, right? You can always give freedoms to somebody,
It's not just
but
freedom,
not take
right?
away your guidance from him, right?
Yeah.
Like your support. Because I do agree. I'm not saying like everything is great now, by no means. But you asked me about men's mental health, and what I see is the consequences of very problematic parenting styles, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we are not just a generation of crazy people who one day decided to be free. We are people who just felt like the institutions are not um, relatable anymore.
Mm.
That makes sense. Like, it's not like we have lost our faith. Is that it's really hard to relate to church anymore. Like, it's not that we don't believe in good relationships, but perhaps the idea that if you get married and you decide to get divorced, that's a big sin and you're gonna go to hell, is not relatable anymore, right?
Why do you think that is?
Because we have capacity to think and evolve as
That's
a
the issue.
society. Why is it the issue?
Well, before it were, as I said, things of that sort, those are called values, morals, regulations, right? Like following.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you
No,
for
no,
a
no,
second.
please.
What you say it worked?
How large are divorce rates right now?
Yeah, it's like 50% or something.
It's pretty big
Yeah,
compared to
yeah.
what it was maybe 20, 30 years ago.
And again, because before, if
The
you got
belief system was
divorced,
stronger.
I mean, I know women in Armenia who were beaten up because they chose to divorce.
But Tigran, women are beaten up even now. That's besides the point.
True, and
But
it's
the
being reported
beliefs-
more, and there are
yes,
laws against
yes.
it. And
But the belief system was stronger. Having the belief, you can be
okay, yeah, no, we are getting to a great point, and this is very, very important to me, and this is why I have like fundamental differences
Mhm.
in what I think mental health should be about
sure.
and what it is becoming, right, and what it is the fact that answers are so good to have. We can have answers from the church, from the school, from the freaking DSM, right? We can have answers from our doctor. What answers we can have diagnosis, right? So what answers do is they stop any possibility of questioning anything. How many times you may have heard, it was such a relief to get the diagnosis of ADHD. It was such a relief of get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that, I can ask for help, or now I know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how we have built our value system or these institutions, these are not institutions that promote questioning.
What institution are we talking about?
Well, we are talking
particularly?
about churches,
Religion?
authoritarian governments, right? Like, well, in the communist, government,
Yeah.
there's no religion necessarily, but there is some kind of like very rigid.
Something to follow, right?
I mean, not only to follow, but to not question.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can follow my dad, right? But I also can have my differences and we can debate about it, right? And I can choose to take some things and leave some things. And that's a good guidance. That's a good kind of, let's call it leadership, whatever, right? But if I have no opportunity to ask myself questions, it's such a peaceful thing. It's such a peaceful mindset because I don't have to think what's right, what's wrong. It's in this book. I don't have to think what do I want in my life because somebody has determined already what a woman should want or what a man should want. I don't have. So when we talk about diagnosis tool, I'm sorry, it's not like, I'm distracted. It's my ADHD, right? Okay. Why is so almost pleasant that you have that kind of like the Joker card, right? Like why is it so pleasant to have answers for everything? It saves us from the anxiety of not knowing. I like the fact that, and I think in fact that any therapeutic process should encompass like this moment where we disrupt, we deconstruct any kind of truth that a person could have from about themselves, which creates a lot of, that's the place where the client is saying, well, I was doing better, now this is like making me feel worse, is the moment where you're starting to unveil these layers of narrative stories, labels.
Let's get down to the point. Is God real? Is that what you're getting at? Like
Is God
Christianity?
real? It's real in the sense of it has real implications in society.
So you're not a believer?
I'm a believer in the fact that as long as you believe, that has real implications. And even if you, it's such a huge kind of like concept that even if I say, well, I don't believe in God, that's not gonna save me from well, now I'm opposing to God, right? Like it's such a.
No.
I do believe in certain kind of like idea
of.
It's
a beautiful conversation.
Yeah,
I
people
don't think have this type of conversations anymore.
No, and we can
respectfully, obviously,
Yeah.
It's important.
I believe in God in the sense, not in a Christian sense necessarily, or not in the sense of like this guy with the beard up there looking,
looks like Zeus.
Like, let's see who made a sin today, so I can like punish him, right? Like that sounds like more like a nosy neighbor than a God. But I do feel like there is some kind of like, call it like spirituality, energy, something that will remain forever,
exactly,
untouchable.
So, but what happens if you didn't have that? How would you be?
I don't think there's anybody who doesn't have that. I think we all have. It's just like
a belief.
Yeah, even the people who say like, well,
atheists,
I only believe
particularly, they don't have a belief.
They do have.
You think so?
Yeah, they don't want to. Atheists are more believers in God than believers themselves, because
you think so?
Like their whole identity is like, well, I don't believe in God. Agnostics. I mean, call it whatever you want. You can reduce a human being to just electrical connections and neural, but whenever you are truly talking to a person, whenever you are truly connected with your feelings, whenever you are truly able to a pet, a dog, a baby, nature, whatever you want, you see that there is something that goes beyond that. If it's real or not, or if there is a scientific explanation or not, doesn't even matter. Like there is something else. And I think it's those who are very, very kind of like obsessively in denial of anything spiritual, or those
The
who are
non-believers.
yeah, it's more than non-believer. It's kind of like I believe in not believing, right? Like it's kind of like fully that's my identity. I feel like it's more about them appeasing their mind of having questions that are going to remain unanswered, in the same way that I feel like Christians, and I'm talking about Christians because we are Armenians, are obsessed with the idea of having a God that is going to give me answers for everything, right? Um, Same other religions, but I think that um believing in God should also mean that you believe in that God give you capacity to think, rethink, and question.
That what you just said right there.
Yeah.
God gave you the capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm talking about. It goes back to that same thing that you were saying earlier, that why should we have somebody tell us how to live, how to be? My thing to that is, my argument to what you're saying is that people, I don't care what age you are, when you are born, you're born with a blank script, white piece of paper that has nothing on that. And when you don't have nothing on that paper, how are you going to live in a sense of control? You cannot manage yourself.
Of course, baby psyches hasn't developed
Baby
to.
psyches, but humans
Yeah.
too. So we need a sense of direction. I'm not saying fully control a person to that level of like communism. There's no way there, but people need that direction.
Yeah.
As you just said beautifully, God gave you a mind. So you already know that there's a hierarchy up there that's giving you a sense of
Well,
direction.
I'm saying
be.
if you believe in God, you should also believe that God give you the capacity to question things.
But he's the one who gave you that capacity.
If you believe in him, right? If you believe in him. Now, I don't have answers. I mean, if I had the answers, I would be the most famous person in the world, but I don't have the answers for it. I know that for me, I just don't feel it. Like I can connect to that idea of God, but I do believe in the idea of like some common energy and life, like something
I do.
beyond material.
I
right?
do.
And what you were saying, the blank slave. When you were having your baby, right, the first baby, let's say, or the second, doesn't matter. You chose a name before they got here.
Yes, we
right?
did.
You imagine all these things that this baby is gonna do, the languages that they're gonna speak, how they're gonna treat their brother or their sister. So they are not born into a blank slave. They are born into
the sense of direction already.
Yes, without that, it would be, I don't know what would happen, right? But we are all born into the symbolic, the language, the other, as Lacan would say, right? We are born into that.
We were born into what was already given to us.
Now, with that, we can do and undo certain things, but the reality is that there are like kind of like two extremes here, which I feel like that's why I'm so grateful about psychoanalysis, because you have the more like Cartesian thinkers, like we are, I think, therefore I am, right? So I innately have a capacity of thinking. So I have a self, right? And then you have the most postmodern thinkers that are, well, we are a byproduct of a society that we also are producing, right? Well, and then how did that happen in a way, right? How did we produce a society? How did we create a society? And if that's true, then why are individuals so different? So there is something about the uniqueness of each human being that it's different. We think differently. We process things differently.
Different biology, different perspectives, mind frames, of course.
And psychoanalysis is somewhere in that truly can merge these ways of thinking, which is there is a piece of the subject that can never be fully possessed or dominated by whatever narrative, right? There is something, and you are saying like, why are all these changes happening? Because no matter how strong the institutions, there is a piece of the human being that goes beyond that, right? That cannot be dominated, and that builds a subject, a human being, like it's not a byproduct of the society, but it's also not a biologically born, thing. Um, it's born through a language, born into a language, into a symbolic, universe, and it does something with it, right? And that's kind of like basically the expression of like, I am what I do with what happens to me or what is given to me. There's that piece of singular thing that we have to kind of rescue constantly about the human
Why do
being.
you think that needs rescuing?
Because otherwise, we end up alienating into these absolute discourses, right?
Which is happening now.
Which has always happened. Like if you think of
More so now, I would agree.
in which way,
I mean, look at everything that's happening around you.
what is that? It's so terrifying.
It's not terrifying. It's disturbing.
What exactly?
The changes in human beings in general. I mean, belief systems, let's just go there, is decreasing substantially. Divorce decreasing
and
substantially.
that's
The behaviors in humans are changing. And again, I'll validate, we're not generalizing, but we are talking about society and human beings, that there's more harm now than good.
well, we're just talking about men finally opening up to seek for help. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well,
If
we're talking about not condoning child abuse. That's a good thing. We are talking about giving certain freedoms for people to think. I know that my kids someday may choose to be religious or to not be religious, and that respect of whatever they're going to choose, and I can give my opinion, of course, and I have influence on them, but that's a progress. That's respecting the capacity of each human being to think. It's very interesting because when I had a call from a very concerned mother because her daughter was identifying as a furry, and she was like,
a what?
a furry, like an animal, like a cat or something, right?
My goodness.
Yeah, that's it's beyond my expertise. I don't understand much of it, but the interesting piece about this was this kid really desperately needed to belong somewhere, and she had expressed that, right? And the mother said, well, who wants to belong? Well, everybody wants to belong. The problem was that her solution was, I'm gonna impose my values and my belief and my identity on her, so she stops with all this crap that doesn't make sense to me. So she took her to Armenian dances, to the church, religiously, like reading this. One could say that's a good thing. It's a good thing if the kid is on board. You can push them a little bit, of course, because as a parent, you have to do a little bit of that. Of if you know what's good for them, you encourage them. But
If it's done tastefully,
yeah,
the kid wouldn't have to identify as a furry. But if the child is pushed and bullied into, like I see it so many times, like Christianity, religion is pushed on children in a very untasteful way. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the obsession with religion,
right,
because I don't
right.
believe in obsessions. I don't like them. I think they're kind of cringy. But I am talking about having a proper, tasteful belief system, and maybe, yes, taking your daughter to a dance tastefully, not forcefully. So there's a way to parent, but we shouldn't not condition the child or have, rules, regulations, morals, values implemented in the family, because that's going to hurt the child if it's done right, like connecting, all of those things.
I would argue that there is no way of not doing that. Like, you want it or not, you are kind of like giving them certain message, right?
I think you have to.
Well, is there a way of
It's
not doing
needed.
it? Like if I don't give any message, am I not still giving them a message?
Do you know how many people are out there living like that and parenting like that? The lazy affairs.
Okay, but to my point, that also means something. When I'm not giving them a set of rules and values and norms to follow,
Yeah.
right? As you were saying, like
Traditional ways.
yeah,
I love the traditional ways.
yeah, no, and that's fine. See, that's kind of like the part that I don't have any problem with it. Um, Still, there are some people who are not doing it the traditional way, but they still have amazing values and they care,
Yeah.
and it's like very
Mhm.
healthy, kind of like relationships
Yeah.
and families.
Yeah.
But then there is what I guess you are talking about, which is the absolute. I'm gonna well, the child knows what the child knows, like, and so I am hands off. Like, let's do.
Yeah,
That's
that freedom. That's what I'm talking about.
it's horrible because it's a fake freedom.
It's not real.
It's
and
not
it's
real.
destroying today's society with that's why we have so many
You
kids
know
identifying as
why it's in my reading? Why is that so problematic?
what is?
The
Too much freedom?
yes,
Mhm.
because the parent is like, I'm not gonna guide them. I'm not gonna tell them what to do. If they like something, they can do it. If
Yeah.
they
No, I don't think that's
okay, the problem with that is that you are not saying anything, but perhaps you express certain disappointment with your face even. So you're not only taking away the possibility for them to kind of like find out what do I do to make you love me. Like kids wanna,
Yeah.
how happy they get
Of
when
course.
they do something like, oh, you did such a great job. That's everything to them, right? That's amazing. You are taking that away from them. So now they are hunting for something that they can do to impress you. But there is no rule, there is no guidance, right?
What do you think will happen if a child doesn't have a parent to impress?
And that's what I'm talking about. If the parent
Isn't that dangerous
disappears,
also?
I think they live in that creates in my understanding that's one of the worst anxieties that any child could have,
To impress their parent?
to not know how.
Yes, to not know how.
Yeah.
Because I think to not know how comes from a rejective parent. No
Or
matter what I do is not good enough.
or to a parent that accepts everything in the same level.
Yeah. So that
Right?
exactly.
I got a C. Good. I got an A.
Yes,
Good.
you're third place. Here you
I
go.
killed the dog.
Yes.
Good.
So this goes back to exactly what I'm saying, and it can come off wrong. But what I'm saying is our traditional ways have worked, but you can turn that
There were
around.
a way.
Yeah, you don't have to be that beating up dad and beating up mom, dad. You can turn a twist to it, a little bit of modern, by maybe telling your kids that you love them and that you appreciate them and that you're proud of them. You don't have, but something was working in the past. And we can't say that traditional dads were all about beating you up and drinking.
No, of course not.
Because
No.
those values were so beautiful. Christianity, the belief system, morals and values are who we are today because of that. Look at, you're a successful therapist in how many different countries?
No,
In
now I'm just here, but
Now you're
yeah.
just here, but in Argentina too. You've worked, you studied. That's beautiful. You're very intelligent. You've read. You're very intellectual. You're very well
But
seasoned.
I was very, very lucky also because there was a system that allowed me to
Thank you.
study for like, first of all, I grew
Yes.
up in a household where everything was about reading and exploring.
Yeah,
Right? So I started to
yeah.
read even before going to school, right? And I loved it. And I still love reading. But in Argentina, I think was the biggest shift, and I'm so grateful for that country for everything, because they gave me the best education.
Mhm.
I didn't have to pay for it.
Yes, I was just
right?
gonna say free.
And it gave me just the opportunity to learn so much. Now, one of the things that it was so different was the cultural shock, right? Like the moving
Yeah.
from Armenia to Argentina.
And then here.
And then here. But here in Argentina, it's like more similar. Armenia to Argentina, it's like huge difference. And I remember how difficult was it for my parents to understand that I can have certain type of relationships with people. I can have uh, friends who are not necessarily like same race, same language, or sexual preference, or all of these things. It took them a while to accept, and understandably so, right? Like
Hmm.
they grew up in the USSR, but the the discourse was between Armenians and between like the people that I met was, you should never date an Argentinian because they don't believe in the family. You should never let your kid, not do certain things because that you should only go to an Armenian school. You should.
Mm.
The fear of the difference, the fear of what is different as always a bad thing, has chased us for a long time. We think that what we know is the good way, is the safe way, because yes, it's scary when it's something new, it's different, it's scary. And I see it like Armenian couples who are struggling, but they think that they are together because only Armenians believe in family values, right? So Americans don't, right? And we have made believe that if it's not a Christian partner, then it won't ever work, because if he's not Christian, then he doesn't also believe in family values and raising our kids, and so there's always that piece of, when we see something that is truly other to us, either we want to consume it into, or we want to eliminate it. And the beauty of everything is when we can appreciate the otherness of the other. Same with two people, right? When we can appreciate that women and men are so different,
Hmm.
and still build something from that difference.
You know what I think sometimes? I feel like that's that fear that you're talking about that parents, portray on their kids, like marry Christian, marry Armenian. I think subconsciously it has a lot to do with the intergenerational trauma that
Maybe, yeah.
it's not necessarily racism, because some people can classify that as Armenians being racist, but it's more
Well,
about
we are fairly racist. Yeah,
every I
yeah.
don't care what you say, I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're brown, if you're white, everybody has racism in them. That's just, you might not have
Yeah,
anybody admit it, but it's a
yeah,
fact.
unconsciously or implicit. Yeah.
Unconsciously, for sure. But I think Armenians have a subconscious fear of losing their culture.
Hmm.
And there's this fear behind that. So it comes off as, don't marry this black person, don't marry this, Hispanic person. But behind that voice is, man, like, I don't want to
I hear you, and I think that the
lose this.
genocide obviously had a lot to do with it, right?
If anything, I think it has everything to do with
Yeah,
that. It's
that
unhealed
and
wounds.
the implications, like
Yeah.
immigration and all of that.
Yeah.
Now, to your point, and I totally agree with you. Um, when we talk about respecting our culture, and there's a lot of narrative about like cultural competence, then that was like a little bit too too problematic, and they changed it to cultural sensitivity, or
Hmm.
then cultural
Yeah.
awareness, in our field, right? Like in mental health, usually we talk about diversity and all of these things, which is great, but there's like a lot of things that are lacking still in those conversations. And there's some kind of like problem there, where just because I respect and I'm aware of our cultural values and differences, it shouldn't be a reason to not criticize it and try to improve it. And that's kind of like what I think, I guess we are a little bit talking about, where we can take something that had good and bad in it, right? And try to learn from what we are seeing now,
Yeah.
because it's not like this generation is a generation of stupid people who don't know anything of anything. We can learn from our kids. We can learn from teenagers. We can learn from younger
Yeah.
generations,
Implementing change.
and see if we can, because it shouldn't be even like how can I put this? What is the option? Imposing this has failed. We will
Imposing marry your
imposing
own
the
kind,
old
kind of.
ways, right? Imposing the old ways has failed.
You think
That
so?
ship, You can see it, hasn't it? It has failed. Churches are struggling to get people in, because if it's not some specific day, most of the people prefer to like sit in their BMW and drive like crazy in Glendale, not to go to the church, right? But the old-fashioned ways have failed.
They're failing because our generation is accepting
But
those
also
new
because
ways.
the
You
system
and
has
I are
changed.
failing.
But I'm happy about that.
I'm not.
I'm happy about that, and I'm telling you,
It's two different things,
for
which
sure.
is
And
okay.
I grew up
But
in
yeah,
Argentina, and you grew up, so it's I
Yeah.
understand that and I respect that. What I'm saying that I'm happy about is that this brings an opportunity for change and improvement.
change and improvement are different, and I agree with you that maybe change and improvement needs to be implicated. But this is not change. This is completely something different. Not going to church because blaming the church for failing. No, I'm failing because my parents went to church Sundays. I'm not
Yeah.
going to church because my life is different. Maybe my belief system is different. It's not the
Yeah.
church failing. I'm failing. So therefore, my kids will be failing,
Okay.
and so on and so forth.
Now, when you go to church,
hmm
and
But I do go to church every Sunday, just
right,
FYI.
right, and so you go to church.
Yes, I'm
right?
keeping that tradition. for
And
sure,
because
in
you
my
have your
belief.
faith in God,
Absolutely.
right, and that's amazing. And for me, there's a distinction between that and church per se. But
Yeah, you don't have to go. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
right.
I agree to a certain degree.
But when you go to, we're talking about the institution,
Yeah.
right? When I go there, and the pastor, whoever that is, right, starts to preach.
Mhm.
And whatever he's saying, and I'm not judging if it's good or bad, I'm just saying whatever he's saying is so disconnected from the problems and the worries and the existential things that we are experiencing now, then you start to fail as an institution. Because the reason why we want to go to church is because we believe that we're going to find some kind of guidance, answers, comfort, right?
Yeah.
When that is lacking, it's not we that are failing, because we don't have the fault for our problems to be modern. we live in a modern society, and our problems are different from
Right.
a century ago.
Yeah. So, but this is why you don't, if you're not connecting with a priest preaching, that's why you turn to the Bible. That's why you turn to the
Yeah.
words of God.
And again,
You know what I'm saying?
but again, for example, and we are only talking about the Christian faith, but
Yes.
like
Yeah, this
the
goes for.
institution fails. So if I don't believe in this building with this priest, that even if I believe in God, I feel like he's not even preaching the word of God. He's just preaching something else, right? I have lost faith in this institution.
I'm not going to lose my faith in institution because of he's preaching incorrectly.
You may, okay, but then what are you believing in?
God.
Okay, God, but we're talking about the church.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So yeah, you can have priests like that are preaching something that's not even in today's world. Like, what is this priest talking about, right? At the end, they give a beautiful speech. They're talking about life and change and being good, and you're just not really connecting. That doesn't mean that I'm going to lose the faith of my Christianity.
100%.
Right? The institution I understand, and I've had experiences with institution that go a little bit beyond of what my comfort is, and I'm like, no, but that will never make me change my faith and how I view God and Christianity.
So this is your particular experience. We are talking about new generations that are a little bit different.
Yeah,
right?
Today's generation just wants to see it. Show me God, I'll believe in God.
Maybe, yeah,
But
maybe.
they're
but
so
they,
great
maybe,
at believing witches,
well,
and witchcraft and all these other
perhaps,
things.
but I mean, overall, I see, for example, like in Judaism, right? I'm not gonna like generalize because it's so big, right? But I have seen rabbis talk in a way that you are like, oh wow, like this person is really down to earth, in touch with these people's needs. And you see then younger kids completely relating to this rabbi, and right? And there are some priests who also do that, who are capable of doing that. But there is an overall thing which is I think what you are talking about, which is institutions like religious institutions, schools, the police, the government have lost credibility.
Some, yeah.
Yeah, and that can create a sense of chaos because um, those are kind of like organizers of the society, right?
They've
They're
lost credibility because of how we look. Go back to saying the same thing, right? Like our grandparents, church believers, fond of church, like you have to go to church, but we're not continuing that generation, right? We're not continuing that because our belief system is different. Our life is different.
Mhm.
So we lose touch with that lifestyle. It's the same thing with cops. Like their generation might be fond of cops. Like police officers are great, like priests are great, but we see them differently. So I think that our generation, we have such a big responsibility of how we're portraying
But
society.
aren't they? Don't they have like
They have
if
responsibility
schools
in it too.
are
Absolutely.
that's kind of like for me
Absolutely.
you have to give institutions
Hmm.
because they have more power than me or you, right?
Right.
And what are they doing with that power?
Yeah, there's for sure certain
Yeah.
institutions are abusing that power.
So I
But is
guess,
that a reason to be where we are today?
but I'm wondering about this, like, and it's a genuine question. Where do you think we are today?
I don't think as a society, I think we're failing as a society for sure. I don't care if you say we're talking about men's health or not. Everybody is struggling with
Mhm.
something
Oh, why is that?
because we don't have foundation. I think that people have been left to live freely and people don't know what to do with that. And freedom can be so many things, but the foundation, the belief, the morals, the values, it's decreasing from so many families. And that's not okay because this is why I go back to what was working in the past. But then certain people say, and like this conversation, well, the past, our dads were beating us up. They were alcoholics. We have more dads right now that are committing suicide, cheating, and alcoholics, drug addicts than versus before. You can't say before they didn't talk about it. Okay, now they're talking about it. Now they're very loud about it. It's not healthier. I think that we need to be more awake. We need to be more conscious and we need to see what's going on in the world, not just be blind by, men have feelings, women have feelings, and we should, yes, those things are important. Of course, those things are important. But okay, what are we doing about it? We're not doing anything about it. We're being victims about it. We're sharing. We're not moving forward. We're not healing from it. And we're continuing to screw our kids up.
For me, there's a big key kind of like point in this conversation, which is if we believe that we have achieved as a society the ultimate truth and the ultimate progress and all of these kind of like um, things that we are not racist anymore, we are inclusive, and we are all kind of like we have improved all these things that were failing in the past. The problem is going to be that,
Failing in the past?
I mean,
I
talking about,
think that's the issue today.
we are in a country that it wouldn't be very wise to say that we haven't been racist. Not we, but they
Yes,
haven't been
that
racist,
for sure until
right?
today. But the
So
inclusivity,
it hasn't been inclusive. I think,
include who? The
well, we are talking about mental health, and we know that
Mhm.
until the what is it 73, gay people were deemed like mentally ill. Although even like Freud in 1938 had that letter saying like
Mhm.
um, being homosexual is not a mental health
Illness,
disorder.
right?
Yeah. So whatever it was the case, there was like um, and my point is, if we think that whatever we had in the past or whatever we have now should be the only truth, should be the only thing existing because the other is bad, or this is, we are kind of like doomed because 10 years from now, all the people that think that we are super progressive and super liberal, whatever, if my child or hears me talk today, God knows how many politically incorrect things have I said, right?
Mhm.
God knows, because that is changing always. I don't think that's a bad thing. What I do think is that when it serves certain people who have been suffered because whatever the narrative has been in, has really damaged them, like, gay people not being able to get married, right? Like, or we're talking about mental health issues, right? Whenever these are like true needs, right, of people who haven't found a place to exist in the society, I think that's progress. I think that's inclusivity. Whenever I feel like it has become this almost like uh, we don't even know what is that we are talking about, and we don't there is no consultation with experts. I'm not claiming myself as an expert, but like, if you are going to set a law, or you're going to change something in the educational system, or you're going to um, you're going to create this discourse based on the fact that you want to do good for society, there should be some experts backing you up. If not, then when we get engaged in this like two extreme political ideologies, not that they are extreme, because none of them is extreme, but they are extremely polarized, and it's completely pointless. Like, you're either alienated to this ideology or alienated to this ideology. Meanwhile, the people who you should be advocating for keep being in between and suffering, right? Like, for me, that's kind of like the big problem. I don't think that we should just destroy institutions because they're old and patriarchal or whatever. I think we can revise them.
Revise them to what?
We can revise them and see if they need to adapt to the current needs of the society. I don't think that we should abolish schools, but we certainly have revised what's the role of a teacher in the classroom, right? And now it's good in some aspects, it's bad in some other aspects, but I was beaten in school, right? Like, that's not cool. Why was that something accepted as a norm back then, right? Well, we changed that. That's a good thing. That's a good change.
Well, I'd have to disagree with that.
With
Do you think it's changed? So you were physically beaten, right?
Yeah.
But now I think that let's just not go far, right? Let's just talk about, since you're, going to be a future dad and I'm a mom, right? Let's not go too far. Let's talk about what's happening in today's society with all this inclusivity that we were talking about, right? So everybody wants to be included. Doesn't matter if you identify as a furry, doesn't matter if you are a man, identify as a woman, you need to be inclusive. We all have to be inclusive, because those men that identify women, they deserve to go into the women's bathrooms, right? So that's inclusivity, right? Like, we have to love and accept everybody and include them. So, okay, fine. Let's say teachers are not beating us up anymore, but they are accepting the delusions and the confusions of children who identify as furry. Isn't that a beating?
What a topic. So what I think it's perhaps tied to what I was saying before.
If you're comfortable talking about this, of course.
Sure, of course.
But I know that you're licensed, and I don't want.
That's
I want
fine.
you to feel safe and comfortable.
No, that's fine. And for me, again, here is the part where the opinion of the experts should matter.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the ideological use of like these very important things are kind of problematic.
Yeah,
Now,
because those institutions, sorry to cut you off, those institutions that you're talking about are not very supportive, are being crucified for their...
But supportive of... this is the thing. The problem is not inclusion or not, because if we are talking about not including these people, let's say transgender people, right?
Yeah.
What do? You segregate them?
No. You call them out and you heal them the way that they should be healed. It's a delusion.
How?
Okay, Tigran, let's talk about this.
How I want to this is my problem.
Yeah.
When we talk about transgender people, there is so many different factors that can create the need for a person to change, their gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think the absurdity that perhaps we are getting into is, in one hand, one people say it's all biological. If your body says something, you are that. When it's not true, because it's not only about having a penis or not. There is like hormonal level chromosomes, and there is like a part of the brain. There is a lot of research about how some men, it's. I'm not going to get into neuroscience because I don't know much, but
So what you're saying is if a man is born with a penis, he's not supposed to identify himself as a man. He can be different things.
I'm saying that having a penis is not sufficient for you to identify as a man, because there are so many other things, even just biologically.
Oh, so there's other factors that
right,
we call.
and we are not including social parts. We are just saying biologically, male genitalia is not enough to,
Yeah. What
for
do you
it to-
think is enough?
So my point here is, in one hand, we are saying that if you are born with a penis, then you are a man.
Mm-hmm.
No discussion about it.
Yeah.
When across culture, historically, transgenderism existed, and always. And now, is it gender dysphoria? Is it something that you can heal, or is it something that it's a problem? Well, I know transgender people who are healthy people, and they don't need really to heal anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
There are I've met some very conservative transgender individuals.
but there are people, they can have different
Right.
mentalities,
But they don't impose.
now my point on the other hand is like, then that's one extreme, and the other extreme is to say that the body has nothing to do, right?
Yeah.
And the whole discussion about gender is a spectrum, right? There is like intersex, there is transgenderism, and even like biologically speaking too, like there are people who are hermaphrodites, right? They have two organs, and it's not as simple. It's not as black or white, and it's certainly not a binary. Now, I guess the problem that we are facing now is that you are taking something, and this is kind of like, I know that this is kind of like the big reaction of the especially Armenians and Christians and conservatives, is like, and this is not a criticism, but like this is what I observe, is that first of all, there is extreme exaggeration of the number of kids who are going through like gender transition, which is a very, very tiny little number.
Really?
Yeah.
If that's so, then why are every schools trying to implement the change?
They're not trying to implement anything.
You think so?
I mean,
What do you think parents
how are they going to try? Imagine this. How would somebody convince you that you are a man?
They're not trying to convince me. They're trying to convince my child.
How would they do it?
By implementing sexual classes and inappropriate books,
So
which has been proven.
Then that's a different conversation that you're saying. Because my problem with going against,
they're trying to attack the
this
not
is the what?
well, the child who's not formed yet. So
if that's what's really happening.
Well, it is. That's what I'm saying. That's what's when you say that the children it's exaggerated the amount. Every school I know in Glendale, LA, Burbank,
But
the districts are all trying to implement these
They
courses.
started to kind of like, get into a panic mode, because now there are millions of people receiving like hormonal treatment.
They are.
They're not. There's absolutely no data about kids, especially.
There's so many clinics that are doing this.
There are.
Hormonal blockers.
Do me a favor and like guess how many kids are doing a treatment with hormonal blockers in the US today.
I don't know the statistics, but I know that I've seen
More or
so
less.
many documentaries on men that were given.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
one
but they were-
story, two stories,
No,
5
Tigran,
stories.
There's more, and we can do a little research to present it. 'Cause
I
know
would say
viewers
this is the big problem, because people imagine that this are like millions of kids, hundreds and thousands of kids.
I wouldn't say millions, but I would say there's a good chunk of kids.
No, in the US in the last years, I think it's been less than 5,000 kids in the last couple of years. I don't have the exact
Okay,
numbers.
let's just say 3,000.
Okay.
That's not a lot.
Now, the problem with this is that none of these kids were pre-pubers. There were, I don't know how many. There were minors, but not that young. Anyhow, I'm not gonna get into that much this, but the main thing about this is the lack, how ideology can overtake a topic that is so important for the health of many people and turn it into something that ends up being damaging, right? I think that the people who are against this, like, what is it called? What does he call it? Transgender ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is, but these are the same people who before opposed gay marriage. These are the same people who before opposed sexual education at school, even though all data showed that reduced significantly the possibility of kids being groomed or abused by others, right? These are the people who are just trying to push everything back to some very, very old Christian traditional way of existing. Now, is it good or bad? I don't know. What I'm saying is that there is a lot of people who are in between of these places who, who don't feel identified with none of these discourses. And when ideology is so strong and we are all like getting our flag, well, that's doomed to fail, because still there are many people who they're not having to their needs met. And so
What needs?
The inclusion that we're talking about.
Okay, so let's talk about this clinically, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that it's damaging to validate and accept.
I would say, an adult, young
Both.
teenager, or
Doesn't
a
matter.
pre-puber.
Doesn't matter.
No, for me it matters a lot.
Okay. So so this is the conversation. So for me, it's like, well, you can be 20, you can identify however, you can be 10 or you can be 45. My thing is it's hurtful to them, because as a therapist, right, as somebody, you're not validating them, you're denying you're denying them. But what a lot of clinicians like yourself are saying is that you're damaging them by not accepting them for their feelings and their reality.
When they're adults, right? When they're
more harmful when they're adults, don't you think?
No, we are talking about kids. This is perhaps my problem with the most liberal kind of idea. When they are kids, and this is based on my theory of choice, which is psychoanalysis, and I truly believe in that because I see that. Like in the practical experience, you see that too. You as a mom, I'm sure you have seen that too. Well, I don't want to impose that. Maybe you have seen it too. Children's sexuality cannot be understood and judged as an adult sexuality. So when kids are exploring and playing with these toys or that toys, or wearing that dress, or this clothes, or this language, or they want to have long hair or short hair, or play with makeup or not, leave them freaking alone. They are kids, they're exploring, they're playing, and everything is valid because they don't have such rigid understanding of masculinity and femininity as we adults have. They're exploring. Now, when you cut that exploration, same thing with therapy, right? When you cut the exploration to give them an answer, that means that you are cisgender, that means that you are transgender, that means that you are gay, that means that you are lesbian. You are taking that power away from them. They should be, in my opinion, free to explore and play all the possibilities when they are kids. Right? Usually what happens is that during puberty or during adolescence, we have a more clear idea. Who do we like? Do we feel like a man? Do we don't feel like a man? And I think that at that age, after you turn you're a teenager, let's say, there might be certain cases, but overall, um, you have a more clear understanding if this gender or this body feels right for you or not. Now, there is one thing about this that I feel like it's very important. Nobody is comfortable with their body. Nobody. Sometimes what I think, this is purely me assuming stuff, is that, again, this could be some ideology giving you the answer for yourself, right? For example, I don't have you seen yourself in a video and you're like, oh, this is what I look like? Or hear your voice and you're like, oh, it happens to me all the time. Like I see myself in a picture, I'm like, I'm getting bald and I'm getting old and I'm getting fat.
Yeah, the critique of yourself.
Yeah, and so what I'm seeing, it's not really how I feel. Right? There is a distinction between me and my body. Let's go a little bit more extreme.
Yeah, there's a fundamental
difference. We are talking about body and our relationship to our body, which is not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? So let's go to eating disorders.
Uh-huh.
They are seeing, anorexia.
Yeah, anxiety-based disorders. Because eating disorder is classified. Yeah, I've worked in reasons for 3 years, actually.
Okay, so you have seen a lot of cases, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you see, well, most of the time women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are basically about to die because they haven't eaten anything and they are skinny, they are just skin and bones.
Mm-hmm.
They see in the mirror and what do they see? Fat.
Mm-hmm. Body dysmorphia.
Right. That's kind of like a fundamental kind of like thing that gives you the idea that there is nothing inherently owned about our body. We build our relationship with our body.
Yes.
Right. So to say that if your body is this, you should feel like this, it's not really a thing, because we know that we all have our discrepancies between our image and ourselves. Now, to your point of talking about transgenderism, and there are some like very interesting researches about what happens when, for example, a man during due to some illness or some cancer or whatever, or some infection, they have to go through like a process of like some amputation or castration, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Many of them, or most of them, they have like the phantom feelings of that, the removed penis, mm-hmm. right? With transgender people who have gone through the surgery, and I'm talking about like truly people who are healthy, otherwise mentally healthy, right? But
mentally healthy that go through the surgery?
Yes, because...
So you think you're mentally healthy if you go and amputate yourself?
I'm saying that there are transgender people who, beyond their gender identity, they're absolutely healthy, they are smart, they are of sound mind, and they don't have any delusions about anything.
So them being male that want to be a woman is not a delusion to you?
No. And I'm telling you why.
Please.
Because in the face value would say, but you have a penis. When doctors actually examined these women, these transgender people, what they found out is that there is actually a part of the brain that it's bigger or smaller depending on what gender you are. Mm-hmm. And in transgender people, like let's say, I can't remember now, I think for men was bigger and for women was smaller or something like that. A transgender person would actually have that size that corresponds to the opposite sex, right? So there is, in the same way that they have the biological organ, they also have a lot of biological other aspects in their body that it's from the opposite sex. So it's not really a mental, imaginary, delusional disorder.
It's more clinical,
It's
physiological.
it's physiological, sometimes it's just hormones, but also that's kind of like debatable. I don't know. What I guess you are mentioning a little bit, and perhaps I running the risk of sounding kind of like discriminatory here, like, or whatever. You see that there has been like a little bit of pushing of,
A little
if
bit.
you are a little bit of like, if you're like a little bit feminine, then you're probably transgender.
Now you're being
If you're-
graceful.
yeah, I guess I am. But I think that's not, that's not.
So when you and I talk about, when you ask me, what am I seeing? My image, my mind, and my heart goes to that, because that is in most of the society today. It's a huge battle between what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's evil, and that is destroying society today. So when we go back to the old times, that's what I always go back to, like, something clearly there was,
I mean, we had 2 world wars, like, so.
Yeah, but this is war too. What's the difference? I mean, we're not fighting with weapons, but we're fighting with our hearts.
They're still killing each other.
It doesn't
in
matter.
many
There's
places.
war has always been, it's from the 1910s to the 1920s. It's always been present, but this is a different type of war now. This is you trying to include me in your mindset, you trying to push me. It's kind of like communism, Marxism, and it's communism in a way.
Well, that's what I mean with ideology.
Yeah,
right.
So make me believe in your system, because that's going to make your life easier, but then I'm going to be miserable because that goes against my values and morals.
And I think that that's the difference that I guess we kind of like, we left it a little bit ago, is, do I need to eliminate your truth for my truth to exist?
And vice versa.
Right, and vice versa.
And
right?
there we are stuck as a society.
But I think that that's the place where you see most of the reactivity, and I think that that's the place where we as mental health professionals can actually, especially researchers, right, can actually make a huge impact. You don't need to. You don't. And I get it, like we study and we learn that we have to be like social justice warriors and all of that wonderful things. Nothing against that, but you as a therapist should be able to tolerate any kind of discourse, right? If I during the time of war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, right? I was working with a Turkish client, right? And I gave him all my contention and all my empathy, and I've never once like kind of felt, not that I'm a superhuman, right? I acknowledge that created some feelings for me. And we actually talked about it, right? I said like, hey, how does it feel to have an Armenian therapist?
Yeah.
He's like, well, I know that our countries and our cultures, but can you as a therapist tolerate a Trump supporter and tolerate a Kamala Harris supporter, tolerate talking to a black person and a white person and an Asian person? Can you tolerate that somebody's going to come and say something that you fundamentally are against, right?
As a person, as a human being?
As a therapist.
Look, I feel like, well, I'm going to go for the human being piece. When you're a human being, I think lots of things, many of these perceptions can be tolerated if yours is as well.
Yeah.
But as a clinician, it's different, because now you are the provider and your job is to provide what's ever best for your client. And sometimes speaking the truth for your client is doing good for them. And I think many
the truth is yours to speak. That's my problem, right? I'm not, and I get what you're saying, and I totally agree with you. I hate, and this is a strong word, but I really hate, because it's truly damaging, the therapists who are just like inflating the ego of the client. The client comes and says like, my partner was an asshole to me. There's not a small exploration of what,
Yeah.
oh, he's a piece of shit, right?
No.
Well,
Those things are not, no.
you know,
That's a little silly. No.
but
That's very biased.
even like, I think like this is happening. Well, then that's probably true, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a very naive and stupid way of like just making your client feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
That's not going to go a long way.
So, but that's the same thing though. Like I feel like, and we're going to go back to this transgenderism, like there, when you have a couple that come, or a client comes and says, my husband's this and this, and you immediately resort to saving your client's feelings of, oh my God, what a jerk, what an asshole, as we were just talking about. I think that you're also imposing that on a client who is
there is a
fundamental difference.
There is a difference,
Yes.
but also there is like a something to be said about what is that we are doing in the therapy room. Why is this transgender person seeking for therapy?
You have to explore that, right? You're not supposed to shut them down, but to validate certain type of delusion is denying them versus accepting them for who they are.
Well, again, you are classifying it as a delusion, right? And I don't agree with that.
You
And
mean
this is
to
our
tell me
difference.
every single transgender has that piece of the brain?
I don't even that's just a small research.
Right.
You know, I have met people who just like a lot of hormonal
Right.
response. Sometimes truly it's a cause of like, you know, trauma and
Absolutely.
like,
and you want to help
delusional
that
thinking.
person, right?
But it's different. Like when I was I remember like cases of transgender people who got the surgery and like had a really bad breakdown because they were kind of psychotic, right? And then there
Yes,
are other
but nobody
people.
talks about that.
But that's a very, very small percentage.
But nobody talks about that.
Yeah, I mean, but again, to be
See, we're always going for it's a small percentage.
Yeah, because it's important, because if we have 100 cases of hormonal blockers or surgeries, and you have 99 that feel better after that, and you have one that didn't, it's important to mention it. And that's why it's important to have an expert to determine if this person is really gonna handle that, because your body is changing. It's a big deal. But to say like you shouldn't because the one person, you are now damaging other 99 people who may benefit. I think statistically is that small, the percentage of people who regret it. It's very small.
I would have to disagree, but let me say this. I think that it's also very important as a clinician to explore the transition.
Oh, of course.
So,
yeah, 100%.
But there's so many of them that don't do that.
Well, that's my problem with like psychology.
You can't do that.
In this era, like psychology is, it has become ideological, and I am open to talk about politics, and it is a political act to do therapy, but it has become ideological because we come from times to do like conversion therapy, which is an absolute crap, like, and people end up killing themselves because somebody tried to say, no, you're not gay. I'm going to turn you into a normal human being. To now, perhaps, I believe that this is progress, this is healthy. So I'm going to, for example, if you're going to deconstruct, and deconstruction is a big word now, everybody is using deconstruction. If you're going to deconstruct a narrative that a person brings about, let's say, monogamic relationships, right? Good. I agree. You have to deconstruct. You have to know why is a monogamic relationship so important for this person. If that's the problematic that they're bringing, right? If the same way a transgender person comes and they want to talk about their job, I'm not going to talk about their transgender identity. They are worried about their job.
Of course,
right? Like
don't bring that up if it's not needed.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
And so the same way, like a person comes and is gay, like for a while, people assume that it's coming because he's gay and we need to talk about him being gay. No, he's a human being and he has like tons of other issues that he wants to talk about, right?
Yeah.
But so when we are deconstructing what has been normative for a while, let's say dominant discourse, right? Like Gramsci or Foucault, these more postmodern thinkers would say, well, there is this dominant discourse that is creating a problem. It's a problem saturated narrative in narrative therapy. So we're going to deconstruct that. Absolutely. Great. You have to explore that. My problem with that is that now you are picking and choosing what you deconstruct or not. So the same person says, I think I want to have an open relationship with my partner. Oh, okay, great. Why don't you deconstruct that? Why do you assume that that's not a dominant discourse, right? Because your way of seeing it corresponds to certain ideology, which I may agree or not. It doesn't really matter. But your job is to, if you are a postmodern therapist, a narrative therapist, you have to deconstruct that too.
Is that what you do in your practice?
No, I do more psychoanalysis in my practice.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Because
That's like
for
your style.
me, it really matters the connection. It really matters how the person relates to its context. And if I go the route of everything is because of this kind of system or this kind of system,
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that I already know the cause of everything, and I'm going to assume a bunch of stuff. If I don't take the context into consideration, I'm going to fall into kind of like sensitivity stuff that I don't really like, which is ends up being, well, if you think different, you're going to act
feel
different, right?
and act different. Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, is the context is important. The narrative is important. The story is important. And that shapes the unconscious of a person. And the unconscious drives the person.
Meaning
right.
you go back to childhood as well.
Yes, but opposed to what American psychoanalysis or psychodynamics do, I don't say like, well, let's talk about your mom, right?
Yeah,
I usually talk about the present. Why? Because the unconscious is not some hidden, thing that we have to dig and find. The unconscious is very present.
You think so?
Yeah, you just have to listen to it.
And how do you get your client to listen to the unconscious? Because
my job is to listen to it, and then I bring them the question. They use it. It's in the language all the time.
True, and the behaviors as well, of course.
The behaviors.
I think that's more powerful.
But I like more working with the language, and I will tell you why. Because yes, even if I see a behavior, I don't want to assume that behavior means something because I have let's say they have an addiction.
Yeah.
What would you say an addiction is? Because this is what we studied everyone.
Well, it's, depending on what it is, but it's a way of coping.
Unhealthy coping mechanism.
Unhealthy coping mechanism through something that has happened, or maybe it's not even happening. It could be a belief system, something that was told that your subconscious mind picked up. Maybe it was a learned behavior. Addiction can be so many things. It's not only like a trauma response or coping.
Right. Good. So I agree with you. And for me, that's important.
Well, if you treat only that, I think that's a very short way of treating somebody who struggles with it.
There is absolutely no way of treating addiction by just focusing on the addiction.
No, there's some. It's just like anger.
Like anger, right? Now, my question is, there is that compulsive character in these behaviors. There's let's call it, there's language into this in this behavior, and we have to find it. If I determine that this person has an unhealthy coping mechanism, like any other person addicted to anything else, then what I'm gonna do is give you homework to find a healthier coping mechanism
and sign you up in an AA program.
Right, and even worse, I'm gonna give you. Some people are not gonna like this. I'm gonna give you indications to start a different substance to deal your substance use. Insane. So my point,
like, go become more religious,
right,
which falls them into the category of obsessive religious, like seeking,
because they find whatever answers they're looking for. Now, if I can really work with what is the language behind this addiction, you usually find is there is a portion of that corresponds to certain pleasure seeking, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there is
Mm-hmm.
okay, that we get it. But interestingly, there's two more things that come up with that. One is guilt and shame,
Of course.
and right after that,
Of
it
course.
could be like substance use,
Yeah,
sex,
I mean
porn,
it's a
whatever.
stimuli use. I mean, why do
Right,
people use stimuli? To get rid of all that and
right.
to feel not so shameful and guiltful, right?
And paradoxically, that's what they end up feeling, right? Shame and guilt.
Right.
And the other piece is there is a moment. What addiction comes? What kind of thing comes to your mind?
Gambling, let's just say.
Gambling. There is a point that you are enjoying it.
Mhm.
There is a point where you are having a really, really bad time. You are not enjoying it anymore. You are losing the money for rent and your
Mhm.
car payment.
Mhm.
You are feeling like crap because you see yourself doing this and you keep going.
Because there's that unrealistic hope.
That's part of it.
Right.
But for me, that hope is not only to winning.
Mm-mm.
There is something happening
Oh,
in
yeah.
that is pushing you beyond pleasure to um, to keep going when it's painful. For me, that excessive part is what I like to analyze more, because that's where the singularity of each person, each comes.
Have you ever thought of addiction can also be subconsciously not wanting to live? Slow
Like a
suicide?
death drive.
Slow suicide, like eating disorders.
Sure.
It's a very painful suicide, and I've had patients who said this to me.
Mhm.
I'm weak. I don't have the strength to kill myself, so I'm just going to let my eating disorder kill me. And they have succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can see that happening
Yeah.
very, very easily, because what you are basically doing is falling into some level of um,
Self-disruption, right?
yeah, it's just cycle of but um, interestingly, in the same way, I have seen people doing that to feel alive.
Just to stay alive?
To yeah,
To
well,
feel
to
alive.
feel alive and to stay alive, right?
Wow,
that
yeah.
that what you were saying before, like that desperate
Mhm.
need to feel something.
To feel alive, yeah.
So this is, we're just talking to people, and we came up with so many different things that could happen when somebody is presenting a symptom like an addiction. How could you possibly talk about one universal truth and treat equally every single person who is dealing with addiction?
You think they're treated equally?
I think this is like what 12 steps programs do. This is what,
Are you
like,
a believer of those programs?
I know people who have found to help there, and it helps, and I have people who found it like really damaging to
Mhm.
them, hurtful. But I say that if there wasn't a need, those programs would
Yeah.
have
I mean,
been
they do
dead.
their thing.
They have a community
Yeah,
there, which is
they
not a
do.
minor thing. It's
Yeah.
I clinically speaking, I find it completely opposite to what I
It
believe in.
is.
Yeah, right. But
It is.
I cannot reject the experience of some clients
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
say it saved my life.
Yeah. I've had clients who said that too.
Yeah.
In the private practice that I was working with, there is a man who Alcohol Anonymous programs, saved his life. Is now a sponsor and has been sober for over 11 years.
It gives them some
It does.
meaning.
It does. And if that's going to help, let it be. And if gambling addiction, from that you turn into a shopaholic, I'll take that versus
Sometimes it's about harm reduction. I agree
it is
with
harm
that.
reduction. Yeah.
And I think that one of these things that we should be more mindful of is, in the same way that I don't like imposing my preconceived notions or books that I read and courses that I did on somebody, my idea of healing also should shape when each person's possibilities and needs. Some people
Mm-hmm.
come from literally being about to hang themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is more so for men. Uh, if I found after some work that this person found some motivation to do certain work during the day, if I found that he is able to connect with some other person, that he, you know, he's been a couple of weeks that he hasn't,
Yeah.
thought about killing. I'm not wanting this person to be happy and excited about everything, because probably the level of pain that he has
Yeah.
experienced, it's beyond my comprehension,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
my hopes for him are my hopes. I have to accept that that person is going to heal as much as they are able
Yeah.
to heal,
Yeah.
and I will do my best in, be there and push them a little bit more,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to understand our limitations. We are therapists. We are not angels. We are
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like saviors of anybody.
Yeah.
Most of the people see us once a week, and
Even though it
then
might feel really good to, have that kind of validation as any human, but
it's
yeah.
scary.
It is. And I think there's a lot of, and I was just at an event and a younger girl, she's like, I see your Instagram, I saw your videos. What do you recommend? What schools do you recommend? And I said, well, why do you want to be a therapist? And she said, because I love helping people. And I said something, she like kind of shook her up. I said, well, what if there's somebody you can't help? What's going to happen to you?
Mhm.
Because this field does come with failures too. You're not always going to be successful.
That's
I mean,
my friends laugh on me all the time, but for me that's castration,
yeah.
right? That's when you notice that
Hmm.
um, you are not omnipotent. You
Yes.
are not, you're just a
Yeah,
therapist.
and sometimes getting into this field can make you feel like that. It is very egocentric. I feel like some people are very ego driven, like, oh, I'm
Mm.
going to sit on that chair and,
Look all
look
intelligent.
all intelligent with my coffee and heel, where it's like, no, that's not how it works. I mean, I've lost clients when I was doing my practicum hours because I was doing it in a mental health hospital in
Yeah, that
Reasons.
happens. Yeah.
I've had a 70-something-year-old woman who was under literally 80 pounds that just had a heart attack in a group class. It was like 25 of us. It was myself leading the group and 25 patients, and she just had a heart attack and died. And
Yeah.
so you see things like that, and it's like when people say, I want to help, I think it's your duty to be like, you're not
Yeah.
always going to save a person, even though that's what you want, that's inside your heart, but you have to be
And I
realistic
think
about it.
to your point, like I had this conversation. I was in this conference recently, um, and this lady, she's a psychologist, asked me like, "Oh, I read in your profile that you like psychoanalysis." I'm like, "Well, it's kind of like 99% of what I studied, right? So I do like psychoanalysis." She's like, I don't know how you do that, and how do you work with trauma with that? I'm like, well, like the rest of the world outside of LA,
Hmm.
work. We don't need to do any specific technique, although there are some good techniques. You can absolutely work with trauma
Yes.
through the psychoanalysis. She's like, yeah, but that's too long. When a person comes in, you have to just like, give them some tools, and then they're on the way. That's why that's how I want to do
Yeah.
things.
It's
And she
not
was,
works for everybody. It's not gonna
it
work.
doesn't work for anybody,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Your
she was
typical
just starting. She was
Yeah.
just starting, and I said, well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
She's like, what do you mean? I said, like, have you ever changed like that? Have you
Oh
ever
my
changed your
gosh.
mind like that?
No, it's years and years. Even on yourself, it takes
That's
years
what I
and years. Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
I mean, and how painful is to accept that?
Nasty parts of yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah. It is
right.
very difficult for any human.
I need to change my way of thinking,
Yeah.
and I don't like this. That means that I have been thinking like, in this way for so many
Yeah.
years.
And learn that type of thinking from this way.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it is mirror neurons too. We pick up. What advice do you give men, since we were on the topic of mental
Men.
health and men? Yeah. What's like a good clinical advice before we end?
Seek for help.
Yeah.
Seek for help. Talk. Um, I would say that I never push anybody to talk with just because I don't know what's their environment, and maybe I'm pushing them to talk in the worst environment ever, and that's not good. But usually they have a sense how safe or how not safe is around
Mhm.
them. So if there is something important, is talk wherever you are listened to.
Yeah.
right? Wherever somebody can hear you, then you can talk.
Yeah.
Why? Because I think that no matter how much we can make all this mental gymnastics of processing stuff inside us, there is something almost magical that happens when we share it and somebody says, "Oh, I hear you," right? Like that's simple.
Yeah.
And maybe, not maybe, for sure, I don't have the wisdom to fix anybody's problem, but usually they have,
Yes.
right? And it's matter of connecting to that, right?
Yeah.
Connecting to things that they already knew, and it was really hard to accept that they knew that.
Yeah.
Connecting to questions that they had, but it's
Yeah.
very hard to ask themselves. Other than that, I don't feel adequate to advise.
Yeah. No, I think that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Tigran, thank you so much for today. I took so
Thank you.
much of your time, but you're definitely a
My pleasure,
wonderful, you're such a wonderful asset. And I think that people definitely do need to know about you. You're very smart and you're so driven, and definitely are going to make an amazing impact in any society you choose to work with. So I
That's a
appreciate.
great compliment.
Yes, I appreciate, because there's, first of all, there's not a lot of men in this field.
No, for sure.
Let me go back. Armenian men in this field. And when I was browsing, I was like, wow, like this is phenomenal. So I'm very happy to see that. And
There's
I'm very
more and
proud.
more. That's good.
I
It's
hope
changing,
so.
right?
I hope so, because it's such a
We need it.
noble career. It's not even a job. It's a noble career to possess. It takes a long time. It takes years of education, and you and I know how hard that is.
Took
and
me a while.
it took a while for me too. It's hard, especially when you have kids and family and life struggles. So you're definitely appreciated and
Thank
valued.
you.
And I thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was my pleasure. And, truly also to mention that, not to sound cheesy or anything, but
I love how you have to say that.
yeah, this
as
is
a
my
male,
Freudian.
and then
This is my Freudian,
slip.
It's not a slip, but there is kind of like that kind of, I have to deny the fact that
Yeah.
I'm being cheesy in order to be able to be
But
cheesy.
that's the issue that we're trying to fix,
Yeah,
right?
this is my macho coming up, and I don't want to be cheesy. But true, no, because you hear this, and it sounds fake at times, right? But how great and how amazing is to be able to be part of others' stories, right?
Privilege, it is.
That's such a huge privilege, and sometimes, especially when I get some kind of like it's a little bit emotional, because sometimes you really feel how much you matter, right? Like not you as a person, but that space that you
understand.
create with the person, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just super grateful to my clients, to my career, and for this too,
Yeah. And I think it takes such a courageous man to express it. It does. Gratefulness is not expressed much, and it's something that really matters. Well, I'm grateful for you. So
thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you so much. This was wonderful.